Chapter 68. Spirit Sword Hall, 4 Divisions Peak. Spirit Sword Hall. Under the control of Wang Wu and her disciple, a duel between cultivators that the public loved to see finally appeared in front of everyone. Being insulted by Wang Wu and her disciple in a way that crossed the bottom line. No matter how cautious Taoist Master Jifeng was, he had no choice but to make his move. There wasn't a single nascent soul cultivator who was truly a coward. The path of cultivation was filled with thorns, and without great willpower, it was impossible to reach this realm. Even though Taoist Master Jifeng's 400 years of long life had caused him to lose his sharpness, when needed, he could still wield his sword to slay the devil. Wang Wu, don't blame me for bringing about your own destruction. Taoist Master Jifeng said and spat out a small sword from his mouth into his hand. That small sword rotated in a circle and turned into a 3 feet long sword. Although it looked a bit cumbersome in Taoist Master Jifeng's hand, the sword's body was simple and heavy, but it exuded a heart-palpitating aura. Wang Wu's eyes lit up. Spiritual treasure. This is a spiritual treasure. Sixth junior brother, quickly help me appraise it. Sixth Patriarch Lu Li, who was sitting on the side and watching, understood what fifth sister was thinking. He shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "The Sword of Mount Kuan, an 8th-rank spirit artifact, can be valued at 800,000 spirit stones in the mysterious sky mansion of the Blue River Plains. In the Central Plains, the price is slightly lower, about 600,000. Hearing this number, Wang Wu almost danced with joy. Good. Sixth junior brother, I'll treat you to a meal when we're done." Lu Li hurriedly waved his hand. "Forget it. Senior sister, you pick the Misty Peaks cafeteria every time. I really can't afford it." A certain ethereal peak master coughed a few times awkwardly. This exotic cuisine is, after all, a favorite of foreigners. It's understandable for us locals to occasionally feel uncomfortable. Then a certain foreign race elder burst into laughter. "Senior brother, you're too much. When I was a slave in the Western continent, the food I ate was..." Ouch, who stepped on me? Inside the Spirit Sword Hall, several elders were merrily making a ruckus. Taoist Master Jifeng's complexion was like iron. "Are you guys done?" Feng Yin Taoist Master also felt that if they continued to make trouble like this, they would become unreasonable. Wantonly insulting an elder of Shangjing's sect was indeed inexcusable. Very well, since Taoist Master Jifeng has agreed to Junior Sister's duel invitation, then without further ado, let's begin. With that, this Taoist Master with glasses stretched out his hand on the armrest of the chair. In an instant, the space in the Spirit Sword Hall disintegrated and was replaced by a high platform floating above the clouds. This was the highest-level martial arts arena of Lingjian School, the Cloud Platform. Taoist Master Jifeng looked around in bewilderment and found out that they were really transferred to another space. It wasn't because he was sucked into some cave abode or an illusion. It's not that Taoist Master Jifeng hadn't seen this kind of magical power before, but he had only seen it from the old monsters of the Unity stage. Even among the form synthesis cultivators, only the few with the highest cultivation could have such a divine ability. Was this guy really a deity transformation cultivator? Or could it be that a soul formation cultivator from Lingjian School was comparable to a body integration cultivator from other sects? It's not that exaggerated, right? For a time, Jifeng's heart was filled with panic. However, Feng Yin Taoist Master quickly dispelled his doubts. This is, after all, the Spirit Sword Mountain. With the help of the sect's power, it's twice the result with half the effort. Taoist Master Jifeng, you don't have to worry about it. So that's how it is. The Spirit Sword sect leader naturally has all kinds of conveniences in the Spirit Sword Mountain. Just now, he was just trying to scare himself. A few days ago in the White Moon Country, when he fought against Wang Wu, the opposite party obviously didn't surpass the level of King Pill. On the contrary, her speed and destructive power were even inferior to the level of King Pill. Moreover, she was so poor that let alone a spiritual treasure, she didn't even have a magical treasure. That being the case, there was nothing to be afraid of. Thereupon, Taoist Master Jifeng's complexion turned solemn as he said with a sinking voice, "Wang Wu, we don't need to talk about the reason for our dispute. Today, since you have invited me to a duel, I hereby promise that if I lose this duel, I will no longer argue with the things recorded on the sincerity paper, and all the sins will be taken by me. But if I win..." Wang Wu indifferently nodded her head. If you want me to be your dual cultivation furnace, I'll do it. Ha ha ha. The nearby Wang Lu was suddenly startled, thinking, damn master, take it easy. The last time you made a bet on this matter, you clearly lost. Taoist Master Jifeng coldly said, I don't need you to be my furnace, as long as you obediently admit your guilt and accompany me to the Shangjing sect to beg for forgiveness. Wang Wu was taken aback. Accompany you to the Shangjing sect? Do you want me to be your Shangjing sect's furnace and play with you at the bottom of the sea? This price is a bit too heavy. Who told you such a dirty topic? Taoist Master Jifeng's mind was in a mess. You're an elder of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. How could your mind be so dirty? Wang Wu angrily said, aren't you the one who made this request first? Let me tell you, I can be your furnace, as long as you can win against me. But if I win, not only do I want you to obediently admit your debt, I also want your equipment and spirit stones. With that, she stared at the 8th rank spiritual treasure, the sword of Mount Kuen, and almost couldn't hold back her saliva. However, the expression on her face was still filled with righteous indignation. This kind of ability made his disciple feel ashamed of her inferiority. Taoist Master Jifeng didn't want to waste his breath. Very well, we'll do as you say. Then, let's make our big heart demon oath. After a few breaths of time, the two of them made their respective vows. Using the immortal law and their own immortal cultivation foundation as collateral, they calmed their hearts and set an agreement for the duel. Not with the help of an outsider, not to kill. If it was written into a written contract, there would be countless room for discussion. However, with the big heart demon oath, these 2 simple conditions were enough. After the oath was made, Feng Yin Taoist Master once again changed the space, raising the cloud tread rooftop, making it look like a martial arts arena. However, when Taoist Master stepped onto the platform, he found out that the space suddenly changed. In front of him was a vast sea of clouds, as far as the eye can see. As for the onlookers like Feng Yin, Lu Xian, and the other elders, they had already become an insignificant black dot in the sea of clouds. Is this another space magical ability? No, it's also an extremely brilliant Immortal's Cave technique. Taoist Master Jifeng inwardly exclaimed in admiration. This was indeed worthy of being one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. Although the scale was not large, this level of martial arts arena, even in the Shangjing sect, only the headquarters and a few super-large divisions could set it up. This kind of vast space could only be experienced by the duelists. From an outsider's point of view, it was nothing more than standing on a raised platform on the cloud tread rooftop. At the same time, the aftermath of the duel would also be absorbed by the martial arts arena, so that it would not hurt the bystanders. Moreover, in case of an emergency, the array would instantly be activated to stop the duel, so as to avoid unnecessary casualties. After using his primordial spirit to check the setting of the martial arts arena, Taoist Master Jifeng didn't detect any abnormality. His heart slightly calmed down. However, after a while, he became impatient. He had been on the stage for so long, what was Wang Wu waiting for? After a long time, the other opponent of the duel, Wang Wu, appeared in front of Taoist Master Jifeng, standing on her emerald green bamboo sword. I'm sorry I'm late. Just now, someone opened a bet on the outcome of the duel, so I went around looking for someone to finance the bet, so it took me some time. Please don't mind, haha. Bet on the outcome of the duel? Taoist Master Jifeng simply couldn't believe it. What was going on with this Lingjian school? Couldn't they show a little bit of respect in a duel between cultivators of the King Pill level and above? Wang Wu sneered. To deal with a small fry like you, there's no need to be so serious. If it's your Hichu Daoren and our sect leader's duel, then it's more like it. But at that time, I'll definitely open an underground casino, haha. Taoist Master Jifeng didn't want to listen to her nonsense anymore. He forcefully inserted the sword of Mount Kuen into the cloud platform under his feet. In a split second, the churning clouds under his feet fiercely shook, as if they were bound by an invisible force. Their movements became slower and slower, and their color changed from white to brown. Finally, the clouds solidified and unexpectedly formed a solid rock surface with a radius of several thousand meters. Not long after, mountain ranges began to rise and fall, one after another. The 8th rank spiritual treasure, the sword of Mount Kuen, was an extremely pure earth element sword, and Taoist Master Jifeng also possessed an extremely pure earth element earthly spirit root. On the cloud tread rooftop, he could only use 60 to 70% of his power. However, with this sword of Mount Kuen, this Yuanying stage Taoist master was able to turn the illusion into reality, creating a home ground advantage. At this time, how could the cloud tread rooftop still have that ethereal and fairy-like atmosphere? What filled it was the surging spiritual energy of the earth element. Although this skill was understated, its essence was actually a Yuanying stage Taoist master's supreme magical method, using the technique of 4 liang moving 1,000 jin to change the surrounding spiritual energy. Although Taoist master Jifeng wasn't good at fighting, his spellcasting was worthy of the title of Yuanying stage Taoist master, which immediately won a round of applause from the audience. Reward giver Elder Lu Xian didn't hesitate to praise him. He nodded and said, good cloud congealing earth. The Shengjing Sex immortal method really lives up to its name, worthy to be the #1 in the Wanxian League. Elder Feng he also gave a high evaluation. Although this person's character is unbearable, his attainment in spellcasting is really good. Compared to the ordinary Yuanying stage cultivators that I've seen in the southern region, he's not just a notch better. Feng Yin Taoist master wore his glasses and pondered in silence. In his eyes, no one knew how the duel between the two had developed. At the same time, in the back row of the audience, a red and white cultivator held a stack of sincerity paper in his hand and loudly shouted, "Everyone, look carefully. Taoist Master Jifeng has displayed his amazing method, proving that he is completely above the ordinary Yuanying stage cultivators." On the other side, it's still that unreliable, unprincipled low cultivation, poor swordsmanship, the disgrace of the spirit sword sect, the fifth elder. The gap between the two is so big that it's needless to say. However, our odds remain the same. Taoist Master Jifeng's is still 1-1-5, and the fifth elder's is still 1-10. Everyone, if you want to bet, you better hurry. All kinds of things in the audience couldn't affect the duel between the two people on the stage. Taoist Master Jifeng took the initiative by using the sword of Mount Kuen to condense the earth from the void. On the other side, Wang Wu shrugged her shoulders as if it didn't matter. She then changed the posture of her emerald green bamboo sword and didn't cast any counterspell. Taoist Master Jifeng inwardly sneered. This woman is actually smart. With her king pill cultivation level, she has no chance of winning against me in terms of spells. Her only hope lies in that sword of hers. I'm not good at fighting, so there's indeed a possibility that one sword can break 10,000 methods. Moreover, the flaw that I deliberately exposed, the other side seems to have taken it all in. Very well, as you wish, I'll go first. The next moment, Taoist Master Jifeng brandished the sword of Mount Kuen. Suddenly, the earth element's spiritual energy between the heaven and the earth rolled up like a hurricane. The clear sky was suddenly covered with a layer of violent sand. Under the cover of the sandstorm, the sword of Mount Kuen moved again and slanted toward Wang Wu's shoulder. Boom! The earth trembled, and the rock ground within a radius of several kilometers seemed to have a life of its own. Along with the movement of the sword, the ground shook and roared. And under Wang Wu's feet, a thick stone pillar with a diameter of 100 meters rose from the ground, just like a sharp sword piercing the sky. Under the stage, Elder Lu Xian clapped his hands and praised, "What a good ground needle." Heh, the impact force of the stone pillar is secondary. The destructive power of the earthquake is also included in it, making it impossible to avoid and impossible to guard against. It's really rare and commendable for a Yuanying stage cultivator to have such a spell. Unfortunately, such a spell couldn't hurt Wang Wu even the slightest bit. Facing the fissure of the ground, the woman in white didn't show any change in her expression. She just lazily pointed her emerald green bamboo sword at her feet, blocking the ground needle that rose from the ground. The emerald green light flickered, and no matter how powerful the ground needle was, it was completely dissolved by the sword. After a breath, the ground stabilized, and the ground needle took shape. Wang Wu gracefully stood on top of the needle. Her white dress was as white as snow, without a speck of dust. The spirit sword sect elders under the stage didn't say a word. They seemed to be accustomed to this. However, the disciples behind them were in an uproar. Just now, the Yuanying stage's ground needle seemed to be 100 meters high stone pillar rising from the ground, but it was actually the result of Taoist Master Jifeng's profound cultivation base compressing the range of his spell, which was enough to destroy a city and destroy a country, condensing the huge destructive power on top of the stone pillar. And the most critical point was the tip of the stone pillar. If it was pointed at the tip, The shock force contained in the ground needle was enough to disintegrate the body of a king pill cultivator and shatter the king pill. However, when it fell under Wang Wu's feet and was touched by the bamboo sword, it didn't have the slightest effect. Thus, people finally recalled a legend that had been passed down for a long time. It was said that this fifth elder was a master of defense. In the past, the disciples only thought that it was one of the 7 unimaginable legends of the Spirit Sword sect. But now it seemed like it was true. At the same time, on the stage, Taoist Master Jifeng's complexion was solemn. His sword of Mount Kuan was still in his hand, and the sandstorm behind him was getting more and more violent, brewing a more powerful killing move. Wang Wu, somewhat bored, shook her bamboo sword. Old men really can't be strong. This empty stone pillar is not strong enough. Brother Jifeng, burn a bit of passion, I'll wait for you. Wang Wu somewhat boringly shook her bamboo sword. Old men really can't be strong. This empty stone pillar is completely not strong enough. Brother Jifeng, ignite a bit of passion and come out, I'll wait for you. Chapter 69. Taoist Master Jifeng, please be like a man, be strong, be masculine. Don't leave a bad impression in our young disciples' minds that Yuanying stage Taoist masters are XX. I'm looking forward to your passion, moi. In front of hundreds of Lingjian school disciples, she sexually harassed a foreign elder. Countless disciples' faces turned red, and a certain disciplinary elder's face suddenly turned pale. Wang Wu, this female rogue's bottom line was once again refreshed. The opposite Taoist Master Jifeng was also enraged. He waved his sword of Mount Kuan, and the sandstorm completely blocked his field of vision. However, a moment later, a green light was ignited in the middle of the sandstorm. Although it seemed insignificant, like duckweed in the storm, it didn't fall. Instead, it became brighter and brighter. No matter what other people said, Wang Wu's defensive sword skill could be said to have reached the pinnacle. Under the spell of a Yuanying stage cultivator, she was able to easily deal with it. There were also some Spirit Sword sect disciples who had reached the King Pill stage, but they couldn't do it. The sandstorm roared, but it couldn't stop Wang Wu's laughter. Taoist Master Jifeng, is this your passion? I can't even use one hand to suppress you. Before her voice fell, Taoist Master Jifeng's figure suddenly disappeared in the sandstorm. At the same time, the sandstorm behind Wang Wu vaguely condensed into a human figure. A golden sword light came from the void, aiming straight at her back. Just when Wang Wu thought that she had succeeded, the opportunity that Taoist Master Jifeng had been waiting for finally arrived. The 5 elements support each other. Earth gives birth to wood. You used your emerald green bamboo sword to borrow my earth element's spiritual energy to double its power, and the king pill blocked my Yuanying stage. Unfortunately, you're wrong about one thing. Although I have the earth element's spirit root, and although I'm not good at fighting or swordsmanship, the sword of Mount Kuan in my hand can't only be used as a magical tool. More importantly, once the king pill is full and the Yuanying stage is born, the 5 elements transformation will be under my control. Since I can condense the earth from the void, naturally I can also turning stone into gold. Take my golden heptasword. With full killing intent and confidence, Taoist Master Jifeng finally made his move. Metal subdues wood. Your wood king pill will be defeated by me. On the Cloud Tread rooftop, under the protection of a deity stage Taoist master, and also under the constraint of the Big Heart Devil Oath, Taoist Master Jifeng's sword had the intention to kill, but it didn't have the heart to kill. Although it was aimed at a vital point, it was not a fatal strike. This could be considered as a Yuanying stage Taoist master's conscience. However, the next moment, the nascent soul perfected one's heart sank to the bottom. With a crisp sound of a block, the emerald green bamboo sword mysteriously appeared behind Wang Wu. The tip of the sword instantly blocked Taoist Master Jifeng's hepta metal sword. The green light flickered, and sure enough, under the Immortal Path's law, the metal subdues wood, the sword finally turned into powder. However, Taoist Master Jifeng's determined strike also stopped. Not bad, you come and go like a ghost. Wang Wu's face revealed a trace of insincere surprise, and then she spread out her empty hands. And then, at this point, under normal circumstances, a nascent soul stage Taoist master would no longer continue the fight. After all, he was a stage higher than the opponent, and his sword was suspected to be a sneak attack, yet he still couldn't defeat the opponent. Even if he won, it would be a joke. However, at this time, how heavy was the burden on Taoist Master Jifeng's back? How could he admit defeat like this? He immediately pulled his face, braced himself, and sneered. And then? Now that you've lost your weapon, if you don't admit defeat, do you want me to hurt you? These words were half true and half false, because in Taoist Master Jifeng's view, the reason why Wang Wu was able to inexplicably block his heptametal sword was most likely because of the mystery hidden in that emerald green bamboo sword. The opponent seemed to be penniless, but as a peak king pill master, it wasn't unusual for her to have 1 or 2 spiritual treasures or magical treasures. Thus, under the premise of sacrificing her weapon, it was understandable that she was able to block his heptametal sword. It wasn't because he was incompetent. However, Wang Wu laughed. Breaking my emerald green bamboo sword makes you this happy? How long has it been since you fought with someone, little Jifeng? With that, Wang Wu reached out her hand and took out a piece of emerald green bamboo from her mustard seed bag. Taoist Master Jifeng clearly saw that it was just an ordinary piece of bamboo, nothing special about it, and then used her magical power to drive it, causing it to gradually change into an emerald green sword. A good weapon that can be used in a fight is by no means a handicraft that blindly pursues performance. Instead, it must meet several basic conditions. Wide applicability, low cost, sturdy and durable, just like the emerald green bamboo sword in my hand. Come on, I have a weapon now, let's fight another 100 rounds, ha ha ha. Amidst her peerlessly arrogant laughter, countless people on and off the stage were dumbfounded. The successive rounds of attack and defense were an eye-opener for countless spirit sword sect disciples. Moreover, the fifth elder's impregnable defense, which could even withstand a Yuanying stage cultivator's attack, greatly changed people's view of her. Although she had no moral integrity, and her character was rotten, but the title of Great Master of Defense was really not a bluff. Moreover, her point of view on what a good weapon was also refreshing. However, among the many disciples, there were also a few who didn't buy it. Nonsense, it's clear that a poor ghost can't afford to use a high-end equipment, yet she's still talking about low cost. At the same time, Taoist Master Jifeng's heart had completely sunk. What the hell, how could this be? Wang Wu's skill was not brilliant. It was just the most superficial refining method. Even a qi cultivating stage cultivator could use it, so of course, she didn't need to be as unrestrained as her. However, regardless of whether she was unrestrained or not, the end result was almost the same. Let alone a spiritual treasure or a magical treasure, even a magical tool was difficult to be considered. Wang Wu's technique was quite brilliant. It could barely be considered as a low-rank magical tool. If she brought it to a place like the mysterious Sky Mansion, if she was lucky, she could exchange it for half a spirit stone. And that emerald green bamboo sword was obviously refined using the same technique. He had spent a lot of effort to break the opponent's weapon, but she only lost half a spirit stone. This was simply meaningless. However, in addition to these few moves, Taoist Master Jifeng was basically out of tricks. He was only good at studying spells, not good at fighting. In his 400 years of cultivation, the number of times he participated in a fight was no more than 50. Especially after he reached the stage of King Pill, he rarely fought with other people. He came from the Xueqi sect, so with his identity as the Taoist Master of King Pill, it was enough for him to run amok. However, when the time came for him to show his fighting prowess, all the heroes in the Xueqi sect would come together, and Taoist Master Jifeng wouldn't need to come forward. He thought that with his 4th level Yuanying stage cultivation, the actual power of the 7th level spiritual treasure sword of Mount Kuen, as well as the several combat techniques that he occasionally pondered over, he would at least be able to take down the King Pill. However, he didn't expect that he had underestimated the world's cultivators. This 5th elder was obviously a cultivator who was extremely proficient in fighting. Whether it was her stable cultivation or her brilliant swordsmanship, she could be considered as a first-class cultivator in the same stage. Even in the Xueqi sect's headquarters, she could be considered as a master with this kind of skill. As a non-combat type Yuanying stage cultivator, it was reasonable for him to struggle. However, this was not a problem that could be solved by a reasonable sentence. Taoist Master Jifeng had no way out, not to mention that he was far from being at the end of his rope. A Taoist master of Yuanying stage, not to mention, his endurance was several times stronger than the King Pill. When the Yuanying stage broke, it meant that his Jade Mansion was completed. His body's magical power was as if it had a life of its own. It could breathe in and out, circulate, and naturally multiply. Its efficiency was much higher than the spin of the King Pill. Therefore, Taoist Master Jifeng wasn't discouraged. After his killing move failed, he retracted the sword of Mount Kuan a bit, reducing the magical power output so that the sandstorm on the cloud platform became a bit thinner. Obviously, he wanted to prolong the fight. Of course, since the fight between the King Pill and the Yuanying stage had reached this point, the Yuanying stage Taoist master had long lost his face. However, as long as he could win, why would he care about his face? With a loud shout, Taoist Master Jifeng once again drove the sandstorm to wrap Wang Wu. However, no matter how powerful Taoist Master Jifeng was, he couldn't cover up Wang Wu's arrogant laughter. "You idiot! You actually dare to prolong the fight with me? Haven't you heard the old saying, there's no such thing as a broken field, only an exhausted cow? Ha ha ha." Several of the Lingjian school elders in the audience revealed a painful expression. A female disciple wearing a colorful dress, who was next to the fourth elder, innocently asked, Master, what does fifth martial uncle mean by a broken field and an exhausted cow?" Zhou Ming clenched his teeth. "You don't need to know that much." "Why?" "Master clearly told me that if I don't understand, I should ask. I absolutely can't act smart on my own. If you ask again, I'll punish you to copy the book 100 times. "Ah. Why?" The female disciple's studious spirit was forcefully suppressed. However, the elders couldn't care less about this matter. The other disciples were also confused. They all had different opinions on the topic of the cow and the field. Although all of this was done stealthily, in the Spirit Sword Mountain, how could it be hidden from the sect leader? Feng Yin pondered for a moment, and then asked the nearby elder Lu Xian, "Junior brother, do you think we should start a physiology class in the 10 Cloud Hall?" "Puff. Senior brother, you." When the people in the audience had completely led the topic to an unknown remote corner, the fight on the stage gradually entered the white-hot stage. And at the same time, it also came to an end. Taoist Master Jifeng didn't know how many times he had launched a violent surprise attack. At this time, the Cloud Tread rooftop was no longer a congealed rock and soil, but a blazing sea of fire. This fourth-level Yuanying stage cultivator used the 5 elements transformation technique to perfection, constantly changing the operation of the surrounding spiritual energy, strengthening his own spell, and trying to suppress his opponents. During this period of time, Taoist Master Jifeng had used at least 50 kinds of high-rank spells, some of which even had the shadow of immortal technique. However, his opponent, the fifth elder of the Spirit Sword sect, although she was just a mere King Pill cultivator, with her endless emerald green bamboo sword, she was able to block all of Taoist Master Jifeng's spells. Moreover, she did it with ease. She didn't even need to breathe heavily. After an hour, Taoist Master Jifeng felt that the 3-colored Yuanying in his jade mansion had gradually begun to pale, which was the sign of the disintegration of the magical power circulation. Although he had repeatedly suppressed his output in an attempt to prolong the fight, his opponent's emerald green bamboo sword had easily neutralized all of his killing moves. Thus, Taoist Master Jifeng couldn't help but speed up his output in an attempt to give her a taste of his strength. In the end, it was naturally a futile effort. Instead, he had destroyed the cycle and ruined the strategy of a protracted war. And then that's it? It doesn't seem to last long. The fifth elder carried her emerald green bamboo sword on her shoulder, somewhat bored. "You're really useless. You're not even as good as 9th junior sister." Someone in the audience suddenly became unhappy. *T. 5th senior sister, are you sick? Are you using me as a negative example? Even if my stage is indeed a bit immature, I'm still at the peak of 7-colored Yuanying, which is much stronger than this waste 3-colored Yuanying, right? I even spoke up for you before, but from now on, the Carefree Peak cafeteria is closed to you. The fifth elder turned pale with fright. *T. Don't be like this, we have a deep sisterly affection. As he spoke, the sky changed color, and more clouds appeared above the layer of clouds. Dark clouds covered the sun, and lightning snaked about. Numerous purplish-green tribulation lightning bolts descended from the sky like vicious dragons that could swallow mountains and rivers. However, the fifth elder didn't even look at it. She smiled at the 9th elder in the audience while casually waving her emerald green bamboo sword to prop up a curtain of light, which blasted the tribulation thunder away. The aftermath splashed in all directions, and in an instant, on the Spirit Sword Peak, the surrounding dozens of miles of clouds were swept away. Just the aftermath alone had such power. It was self-evident how much pressure the fifth elder, who was in the middle of the tribulation thunder, was under. However, the emerald green bamboo sword in her hand was still nimble, and Wang Wu's complexion didn't even change. Why, the purplish-blue sword of Mount Kuen in Taoist Master Qi Feng's hand continued to tremble. Just now the tribulation thunder had already begun to overdraft his true qi, but it still couldn't shake the opponent's defense. Even the several Yuanying stage Taoist masters in the sect couldn't do this. This fourth-level Yuanying stage Taoist master couldn't understand how a mere king pill could do this. How can you be so strong? Did you really rely on your own strength? Taoist master Jifeng gritted his teeth and couldn't help but question. If she didn't cheat, how could she, a mere king pill, withstand the full power of a Yuanying stage Taoist master? As a result, Wang Wu just shrugged. It's not that I'm too strong, but you're too weak. Of course, compared to the average Yuanying stage Taoist master, you're not bad. At least your spells are dazzling. Unfortunately, you came to the wrong place. Do you see those Yuanying stage elders in the audience? Even the weakest among them, that particularly young and beautiful girl, is 10 times stronger than you. Although my cultivation level is the lowest among my peers, in the end, I'm still one of them. You, a Yuanying stage Taoist master who used the Heaven Essence Kila technique, better save your breath. When Wang Wu mentioned the Heaven Essence Burning Blood technique, Taoist Master Jifeng immediately angrily said, "This has nothing to do with the Heaven Essence Burning Blood technique. I'm just not good at fighting, so it's hard for me to use my cultivation level. Otherwise, how could a mere king pill like you have the leeway to be so arrogant?" Wang Wu sneered. Not good at fighting? The reason you're using is pretty high-sounding. In the White Moon country, when you bullied me because my cultivation level was only king pill, why didn't you mention that you're not good at fighting? If you can beat me, then you're invincible. If you can't, then you're not good at fighting. Do you have any face? In fact, for a cultivator like you who used the Kila technique to fatten up, even if you want to become good at fighting, you have no chance. The reason I destroyed your headquarters in the White Moon country was to prevent this kind of nonsense technique from being spread to the world, which would harm those seedlings of immortal cultivation who originally had a bright future. A bunch of nonsense. What do you, a rude and tasteless woman, know? When I'm done with my research, the Heaven Essence Burning Blood technique will lead the revolution of the entire immortal cultivation world. It will be no less than Patriarch Lu He's creation of artificial spirit root. Any cultivator who is limited by insufficient aptitude may be able to break through and achieve a higher stage. The 9 regions may even return to the glory of the Dreamtime. Unfortunately, all of this will be destroyed in your hands. You'll become the sinner of the entire immortal cultivation world. Wang Wu sneered. Don't accuse me. I've already become the sinner of history more than once, so why would I care? You, on the other hand, are quite outrageous with your fantasies. You want to lead a revolution? With this opportunistic life-shortening technique? Taoist Master Jifeng loudly said. What else can I do? Aptitude is insufficient, perception is insufficient, opportunity is insufficient, and resources are insufficient. Once you reach the end of the immortal cultivation path, without any extraordinary method, how can you continue to move forward? In this world, except for a few gifted children of heaven, who hasn't encountered bottlenecks on the immortal cultivation path? Who hasn't repeatedly tried to break through but failed? So instead of wasting your time in front of the fool's barrier, why not turn your useless lifespan into power, break through to a new stage in one fell swoop, and see that infinitely wonderful scenery? Wang Wu put away her emerald green bamboo sword and clapped her hands. Well said. But I want to ask, if your aptitude is insufficient, perception is insufficient, opportunity is insufficient, and resources are also insufficient. Without any conditions, how can you still cultivate to become an immortal? Just be an obedient mortal. Do you really think that everyone on the immortal cultivation path is equal? Dream on. If you don't have the ability, don't expect that treatment. This is the unchanging truth of the immortal cultivation path for thousands of years. If you want to wholeheartedly enjoy the scenery, that's fine. But you must be aware that when you walk on the immortal cultivation path with the mentality of a spectator, using extraordinary methods to bypass the barrier of tempering, no matter what appears on this road, it's just a scenery that can only be watched from afar. To put it bluntly, it has nothing to do with you. Ridiculous, you've cultivated to the 4th level of Yuanying stage, yet you don't know that you've even lost your basic Tao heart. Fighting with me in front of me is like running naked to make a fool of yourself, extremely ridiculous. A dignified 4th-level Yuanying stage cultivator with exquisite spells from the Shangjing sect can't even shake my 1-foot sword defense. Have you ever thought about how weak your Yuanying is? With this kind of brain, you still want to lead the revolution? You're leading people straight to the cesspool. Ha ha ha, simply a lunatic's ravings. The 5th Elder's hearty rebuke caused Taoist Master Jifeng's brain to buzz. His vision blurred. His chest was stinging with unbearable pain, and a sweet fishy taste immediately gushed up to his throat. His mind was injured, his jade mansion was shaken, and all methods were wasted. It was hard to imagine that a Taoist master of Yuanying stage would end up like this just because of a verbal argument. However, Taoist Master Jifeng's hand covered his chest, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't suppress the rampaging magical power in his body. His Tao heart was shaken, and everything was over. Wang Wu's words directly broke through Taoist Master Jifeng's century-old stubbornness and arrogance, and mercilessly ripped off the mask that he used to deceive himself. That's right, what heaven-burning blood technique. To put it bluntly, it was just a slightly brilliant opportunistic method. He thought that with this method, he could overcome all barriers of aptitude and perception. However, he didn't know that this rebellious attitude against the immortal path had doomed him to be abandoned by the immortal path. Was there really a cultivator with the king pill who could easily defeat a Yuanying stage cultivator? Perhaps there was, for example, in the Shangjing sect, in the Azura Palace. However, this was not the reason why he lost to Wang Wu. To put it bluntly, it was not because the opponent was too strong, but because he was too weak. It was not because his cultivation was weak, nor his spell was weak, but because his Tao heart was weak. The concept of Tao heart, for many low-level cultivators, was mysterious. Losing because of a weak Tao heart was even more difficult to understand. Just now, when Taoist Master Jifeng and Wang Wu fought, with just a thought, he condensed the earth from the void, turned the stone into gold, used several spells, and controlled the surrounding spiritual energy. He was absolutely worthy of the title of Shangjing sect's Yuanying stage cultivator. He also won the unanimous praise of the elders of the Lingjian school. So how could he be weak? The answer was very simple. The Tao heart was mysterious, but it had endless wonderful uses. And the most important point was, when two cultivators fought, the strength of the Tao heart would directly affect the outcome. Your Samadhi True Fire has 5,000 attack power, while my Diamond Stars only has 3,000. It seemed like I would lose without a doubt, but if my Tao heart is twice as strong as yours, the winner would be me. This was a completely different concept from hitting a wooden dummy. The elders of the Lingjian school only praised Taoist Master Jifeng's attainment in spells. From the beginning, they didn't think that Taoist Master Jifeng had a chance to win, because the disparity in their Tao heart was too big. Taoist Master Jifeng's supreme Tao heart was not weak, but his opponent, even if she only had the cultivation of the king pill, even if she created her own method to cultivate her Tao heart, after all's non-phase immortal heart. Chapter 70. On the Cloud-Tread rooftop, the violent transformation of the 5 elements finally came to an end. The mountain rocks in the void, the rolling fire clouds, and the howling sandstorm. All of the phenomena brought by Taoist Master Jifeng had disappeared. The spirit sword peak was still filled with the warm sunshine and a thin layer of light clouds. I admit defeat. After a long silence, Taoist Master Jifeng lightly said. At this time, his face was as pale as paper, and the blood from the corner of his mouth dripped onto his lapel. In this duel, no matter how unwilling he was, in the end, he had already lost. There was no point in forcing himself to continue. Instead, he would lose the face of the Shangjing sect. Relying on his last bit of rationality, Taoist Master Jifeng finally didn't make the insane suicidal choice. Since I've lost, everything is based on the bet. In the future, if there's an opportunity, I will definitely pay you a visit to ask for forgiveness. Taoist Master Jifeng bitterly smiled as he deeply bowed to the elders of the Lingjian school. The so-called if there's an opportunity, in fact, there was no opportunity. His conspiracy in the White Moon country was exposed, and he suffered a crushing defeat in the Lingjian school. According to the sect's rules, being able to keep his life was already good enough. Being suppressed in the temple for 100 years was the minimum punishment, but after 100 years, his lifespan would have already run out. A Yuanying stage Taoist master's lifespan was usually around 600 years. Taoist Master Jifeng was already more than 400 years old, so it stood to reason that he still had nearly 200 years of lifespan left. However, in the fight with Wang Wu, his heart was shaken and his jade mansion trembled. Although his cultivation didn't regress, he suffered countless internal injuries, which could almost be said to be hopeless to recover. Whether as an elder of the Shangjing sect or as a Yuanying stage cultivator, he had no future to speak of. That being the case, what was the point of stubbornly holding on to his tongue? Not to mention, even in terms of debating ability, he couldn't be compared to that woman in white. Since Taoist Master Jifeng readily admitted defeat, no more twists and turns, the Lingjian school also reciprocated by not hitting him when he was down. The most prestigious elders of the sect silently waved their hands to disperse the crowd of onlookers, leaving Taoist Master Jifeng with the last bit of face. After that, Feng Yin Taoist Master sighed and silently left the cloud platform. The second elder, Lu Xian, and the third elder, Feng He, wordlessly arrived at Taoist Master Jifeng's side. They set up their swords and prepared to personally send him out of the mountain gate, which was a little bit of respect for this Yuanying stage elder. The Lingjian school's behavior could be considered kind. However, Taoist Master Jifeng couldn't help but wryly smile in his heart. This is the so-called victor's etiquette. First, he beat the other half to death, and then politely handed out a handkerchief. "Wipe your nosebleed, dear." In the past decades, it was always him who handed out the handkerchief on behalf of the Shangjing sect. When had he ever been pitted by the other party as a loser? Your honorable sect really hid it well. When he was about to leave the mountain gate, Taoist Master Jifeng could no longer hold back and sighed with emotion. The top 5 of the Wanxian League really deserved their reputation. Even after his investigation, the most worthless fifth elder of the sect, a mere king pill cultivator, had such skill. How powerful would the other Yuanying stage elders be? It was really frightening. Upon hearing this, the 2 spirit sword sect elders beside him just faintly smiled. Lu Xian said, "Fellow Taoist Jifeng, you're overthinking it. Fifth junior sister is a famous master of defense. Even if junior brother Feng He and I were to fight her, it would not be easy for us to break her 3-feet sword defense." Hearing this, Feng He suddenly frowned. Although he didn't speak, he said to his junior brother through his primordial spirit, "Senior brother, it's just a 3-feet sword defense. Is it really that difficult to break it?" Lu Xian asked back, "Indeed, it's not difficult for us to break her 3-feet sword defense, but junior sister still has a 1-foot sword defense, and even an inch sword defense. Just thinking about it gives me a headache. Junior brother, do you have the confidence to break her full defense?" Feng He thought for a moment. Several times, he wanted to open his mouth, but in the end, he swallowed it back. Indeed, fifth junior sister's impregnable defense was really hateful. Today on the Cloud Tread rooftop, it was just a small test. Over the years, only the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, who had suffered from it, had a deep understanding of it. However, there was no need for outsiders to know about these things. In any case, it was just a kind of humanitarianism to comfort them. Upon hearing this, Taoist Master Jifeng sighed with emotion. This Lingjian school had been underestimated too much over the years. Perhaps in terms of comprehensive strength, there was still a big gap between this withered sect and Shangjing sect, Kunlun sect, and other sections. However, none of the 10 great elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall could be underestimated. Moreover, over the years, many people had overlooked a very important factor. Although the elders of the Lingjian school seemed to be in their twilight years, in fact, they were not that old. Among them, the oldest great elder, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect, Feng Yin Taoist Master, had just celebrated his 300th birthday a few years ago. The youngest, Hua Yun, seemed to be only 156 years old. Based on their cultivation level, although they couldn't be regarded as the top geniuses in the immortal cultivation world, considering the fact that they were on the same stage, their strength was overwhelming, which was really terrifying. Even if the Shangjing sect was the #1 sect in the immortal cultivation world, how many of them could be compared to the 10 elders of the Spirit Sword sect? Perhaps only the dozens of madmen in the Greater One Hall could do it. He hated himself for being blinded by greed, rashly kicking this iron plate, and finally losing his reputation. Now, in addition to the bottomless abyss in front of him, Taoist Master Jifeng had no other way to go. At this time, the 3 of them had already reached the edge of the mountain gate. Just a few more steps and they would be out of the boundary of the Lingjian school. And once they were out of the boundary of the Lingjian school, in theory, they would be in the Shangjing sect's territory. The two elders who were supposed to send the guest off stopped here. After sending him to his seat, they turned around and left. Taoist Master Jifeng sighed, and with a trace of determination, he was about to take a step when suddenly, someone shouted from behind him. "Student Jifeng, please wait a minute." This voice was very familiar to him. It was the voice of the Spirit Sword Sect's fifth elder who sent him into the abyss. Logically speaking, he should hate her to the bone. However, upon hearing her voice, his heart couldn't help but waver. She wants me to stop at this time. Could it be that there's a turn for the better, that I can still be saved? For example, she feels that it's too cruel to let me die, so it's better for us to discuss a harmonious solution and so on. As a result, Wang Wu's next sentence made him vomit blood. "Don't take away our sword of Mount Kuan and other equipment and spirit stones." Puff. "When did the sword of Mount Kuan become yours?" "No, when they made the oath before the duel. It seemed like there was indeed such a thing." Just as Wang Wu said, in the duel, the winner takes all, and the loser kneels and licks. She really didn't forget to take all of them. Taoist Master Jifeng was silent for a moment. His primordial spirit penetrated his jade mansion and looked at the sword of Mount Kuan that was being nurtured inside. His heart couldn't bear it. This sword's grade was not particularly high, but it was, after all, a genuine spiritual treasure. When he first entered the Yuanying stage, the sect leader personally gave it to him, and later, it accompanied him for 100 years. Spiritual treasures have their own spirit, and the sword of Mount Kuan was no exception. The sword spirit, Autumn Beam, was gentle, refined, and loyal. Taoist Master Jifeng regarded her as his own daughter, so how could he be willing to give it to others? However, thinking of the 100 years of imprisonment in the temple, he couldn't help but shudder. In this life, he had no hope, so why should he implicate that child Autumn Beam to suffer with him? Taoist Master Jifeng no longer said anything. Enduring the stabbing pain in his heart, he used the power of his Yuanying stage to make the sword spirit Autumn Beam sleep, and then threw the sword of Mount Kuan and the mustard seed bag containing all of his belongings to Wang Wu. "Good, treat her well." The woman in white smiled and received the sword of Mount Kuan, and then enthusiastically waved at him. "Take care, classmate Jifeng, I won't send you off." Humph. Jifeng's heart was filled with anger. He turned around and flew away. The woman in white looked up at the sky and regretfully said, "This guy is really tough." Behind her, her beloved disciple, Wang Lu, slowly walked over and asked with a smile, "Where did his toughness come from? Did you make his blood vessels so hard?" The fifth elder said, "I just tried to save his life, but unfortunately, he didn't appreciate it." F***CK? "We were just watching the whole time, but aside from extorting and showing off, when did you save people?" The fifth elder was distressed by her disciple's lack of understanding. "You really don't understand me. I'm the kind of person who hits someone when they're down, and I take pleasure in slapping their face. Just now, I clearly hinted to him that there was a way for him to survive." After thinking about it, Wang Lu really couldn't understand. "I'd like to hear the details." "You see, this time his matter in the White Moon country has been exposed. If he goes back to the mountain, he'll die, right? Therefore, if it were me, I would simply not go back to the mountain, and instead seek political asylum from other sects." F***CK? Political asylum? The fifth elder excitedly explained. "You see, although his heart is unstable and his actual combat ability is terrible, he is, after all, a Yuanying stage Taoist master. As one of the Shangjing sect's elders, he can be regarded as a middle-level manager. Moreover, he's also the person in charge of a certain local branch. This kind of person must have a lot of blackmail materials in his hands. For example, the Shangjing sect used its so-called continent-wide strategy to establish branches in various places to carry out intelligence work, monitor the actions of other sects, and even use undercover and other means to interfere with other sects' internal affairs and other secret plans." F***CK. Master, where did you get this idea from? Moreover, if he really dares to expose his own sect's information, that's a naked act of courting death. The fifth elder had a lonely expression on his face. "How can a little brat like you know about the world's general situation? Right now in the 9 regions, the Shangjing sect is the most powerful sect, and there are countless sects that want to bring them down. Even the rumored Kunlun sect, which is in the same boat as the Shangjing sect, only came together because of common interests. Secretly, their intrigue and intrigue are hard to describe. Not to mention there's also the Royal Soldier sect, the long-standing opponent of the Shangjing sect. In this case, as long as he, Jifeng, dares to send himself to the cusp of the wind and waves, there will certainly be people who will come forward to protect him. If I'm the sect leader, I will generously let him stay. If your Shangjing sect wants him back, you can, but you have to give me 5 million spirit stones. Wait a minute. 5 million spirit stones? What if the Shangjing sect really takes it out? If they take it out, it means they have a guilty conscience. If they don't give me 10 million spirit stones, don't even think about sealing my mouth. Seeing that the topic has gone off the rails, Wang Lu glanced at his master, who was still immersed in the pleasure of pointing out the country, and could not help but sigh. You, this brain-dead elder, are indeed worthy to be the #1 swindler in the Spirit Sword sect. Chapter 71. Taoist Master Jifeng absent-mindedly flew eastward from the Spirit Sword Mountain. Because he had lost his sword of Mount Kuan and his Tao heart was shaken, his flying speed was not fast. After nearly an hour, he still hadn't left the area of influence of the Spirit Sword Mountain. Then, Taoist Master Jifeng saw a black-clothed Taoist blocking his way. Recovering from his trance, Taoist Master Jifeng stared at him and couldn't help but be startled. Then his heart turned cold. Kong Zhang. Taoist Kong Zhang, like him, was a cultivator of the Shangjing sect. Both of them cultivated in the Blue River Region Division. However, his identity was highly independent, and he was not under Taoist Master Jifeng's jurisdiction. Although his cultivation level was no higher than the King Pill, he had never given Taoist Master Jifeng any face. Because this Taoist Kong Zhang was a subordinate of the hall leader of the Shangjing sect. He was responsible for intelligence work independently, and was directly responsible to the hall leader and the sect leader. He was somewhat similar to the Great Ming country's genie guards. Taoist Kong Zhang's intelligence work was both external and internal. However, in the past, he was low-key. Taoist Master Jifeng had repeatedly probed him, but he remained unmoved. Thus, Taoist Master Jifeng gradually let down his vigilance. He thought that this person was just a good-for-nothing who, like him, was sent to the Blue River region because of his lack of ability. Therefore, Taoist Master Jifeng's little trick in the White Moon country was concealed from him, but now it seemed lost. Taoist Kong Zhang's cold words squeezed out from his cyan face, making Taoist Master Jifeng's chest turn cold. Things had indeed been exposed. This fellow disciple, who was more like a ghost than a human, had probably known everything from the very beginning. He had just deliberately allowed him to act, probably to bait him? Yes, I lost. Kong Zhang coldly said, disgraceful waste. You? Taoist Master Jifeng's anger was ignited. Even though he was indeed a stray dog, he was still a Yuanying stage elder. A little king pill cultivator like you shouldn't flaunt your strength here. Who do you think you are? The 5th elder of the Lingjian school? The Yuanying stage cultivator's heart was filled with anger. His magical power spontaneously revolved, trying to mobilize the surrounding spiritual energy to cast a spell to teach Kong Zhang a lesson. However, before Taoist Master Jifeng could make his move, a lightning bolt suddenly appeared in front of him. The next moment, Taoist Master Jifeng completely froze. The magical power that he had just circulated was forced to stop, because even if he had thousands of spells in his mind, at this time, he was no match for the dagger that was placed across his neck. Taoist Kong Zhang, with a golden dagger in his hand, crossed the distance of a kilometer in a flash, broke Taoist Master Jifeng's protective spell, and placed the dagger on his vital point. Then, he sneered in front of Taoist Master Jifeng. Trash indeed. You can't even take a single move from me. Taoist Master Jifeng only felt a surge of coldness. Just a moment ago, the power of thunder poured into his body and launched a surprise attack from inside and outside. Not to mention that he was caught unprepared. Even if he was fully prepared, whether or not he could block it was still unknown. With this in mind, Jifeng trembled as he asked, "Are you really just a cultivator with the king pill?" Kong Zhang sneered. "To deal with a waste like you, why would I need a higher stage?" With that, he stretched out his hand and pointed at the center of Jifeng's forehead. A strange magical power was stimulated and formed a seal in the air. No matter how much of a waste Taoist Master Jifeng was, his knowledge was extensive. He quickly recognized the meaning of the seal. This is Kong Zhang without the trial of the sect. You can't do this to me? What a joke. A waste like you doesn't need the trial of the sect's elders. The evidence of your crime has already entered the mountain, so you have no choice but to admit it. Kong Zhang stretched out his right hand and forcibly slapped the seal into the center of his forehead. Taoist Master Jifeng screamed as he was suddenly wrapped in a powerful magical power and gnawed away. His whole body was twisted and groaning. Taoist Master Jifeng's body, which had been painstakingly cultivated for 400 years, was unexpectedly defenseless in front of this seal. In just a cup of tea's time, Taoist Master Jifeng's appearance had completely changed. The original old man was replaced by a green donkey. Kong Zhang led the green donkey and treaded on the cloud. Before long, they arrived at an unremarkable town in the Blue River region. The town wasn't big, but it was located on the main road. It was bustling with people coming and going. Kong Zhang landed a few miles away from the town. When he landed, his blue robe, which contained countless magical power, had turned into a common coarse gown. Kong Zhang himself, from a cold-faced Taoist master, had turned into a middle-aged peddler. Leading the green donkey, he slowly walked into the town. After entering the town, Kong Zhang went straight to an inn, tied the green donkey outside the door, and asked the waiter for a guest room. After eating a few dishes on the first floor, he went upstairs to rest. However, when he pushed open the door and stepped inside, that simple and crude guest room suddenly changed into a stretch of green water and green mountains. It was like a completely different world. Not long after Kong Zhang entered the guest room, several Shungjing sect cultivators in black clothes flew over and respectfully saluted him. Kong Zhang nodded to one of them, and then said, "Give me the information on the Lingjian school in recent years." That cultivator in black clothes complied and returned half an hour later, holding 5 jade slips in his hand. Kong Zhang could not help but frown. Only these. In recent years, the intelligence focus of the Blue River region was not on the Lingjian school. This one of the 5 uniques had been low-key for too long, which made people almost uninterested in it. Instead, some of the second-rate sects in the Blue River region had risen up, stirring up trouble and attracting people's attention. It was just that. Kong Zhang didn't expect that with the intelligence network of the Shungjing sect, the information on the Lingjian school would be so lacking. However, when he took a piece of jade slip and used his primordial spirit to look at it, cold sweat suddenly poured out like a spring, and his mind was greatly shaken. What's going on with this sect? Putting down the jade slip, this cold-faced cultivator couldn't help but scold. Jifeng, that waste, he almost provoked a disaster. Shungjing sect never feared enemies, but they also absolutely would not casually make enemies. Especially now that they have a continent-wide strategy, setting up branches in various places was to make friends, not to make enemies everywhere. If they really provoked the whole world, no matter how powerful Shungjing sect was, it would still be a dead end. In particular, although the Shungjing sect was the strongest in the Wanxian League, it was not invincible in the Wanxian League. Some enemies, if possible, should not be provoked. After reading the jade slip, Kong Zhang immediately concluded that this Lingjian school was absolutely one of the targets that should not be easily provoked. Of course, it was not to say that the Shungjing sect really couldn't be provoked, but the loss was not worth the gain. Thinking to this, Kong Zhang sighed, picked up the pen, and then quickly wrote in the air. One day later, a golden flying sword flew from the east and fell into the boundary of the Lingjian school. That flying sword's momentum was extremely fast, but it suddenly stopped in front of the Spirit Sword Mountain's gate and quietly floated in the air, like a visiting guest from afar. Before long, the gate of the Lingjian school opened up a corner, and that flying sword slowly flew along the open path and finally fell into the palm of an old man. The old man was naturally the sect leader of Spirit Sword Mountain, Feng Yin, who was in charge of all living things. He put the golden flying sword into the gate because he had already recognized it as the Shungjing sect's messenger flying sword. Speaking of which, in today's increasingly frequent exchanges between the major sects, messenger flying sword was rarely seen. It was only used in relatively formal occasions, and usually, it was just a few communication talismans, which was fast and labor-saving. With a bit of suspicion, Feng Yin took the golden flying sword and found that there was a mustard seed bag tied to the sword robe. Inwardly, he immediately understood. It turned out to be an express delivery. No wonder they didn't use talismans. However, what did the dignified Shungjing sect want to send? Why did they have to be so secretive? Usually, this flying sword was used between individuals to send messages. The two sects, especially the big sects of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, usually had to be careful in their every move. The Lingjian school had always been low-key, but the Shengjing sect was known as the world's #1 sect, so their face has always been particularly meticulous. If there was something that they wanted to send, they would certainly send a cultivator to personally deliver it with great fanfare. They would never simply send out a golden flying sword. No matter how you looked at it, it would be disrespectful. Last time, when Taoist Master Jifeng angrily single-handedly attacked them, Feng Yin Taoist Master actually saw through his guilty conscience. With the Shengjing sect's unique pretentious attitude, how could they let a mere branch leader like him rashly attack them? Even if the Shengjing sect looked down on him, they still had to do a good job with their face, right? Then this time, Feng Yin smiled. He guessed that it was most likely related to Taoist Master Jifeng's matter. The Shengjing sect also knew that this was a scandal, so they didn't dare to publicize it. And this mustard seed bag, was it their money to cover up their secret? Well, he could actually look forward to it. Although the Lingjian school wasn't poor, and with the size of the school, it could be said that it was abundant in resources, but compared to the rich and overbearing Shengjing sect. According to Feng Yin's knowledge, the Shengjing sect's annual foreign affairs expenditure was tens of millions of spirit stones. Therefore this time, Taoist Master Jifeng had stirred up such a big trouble, so how could he not give up 1 or 2 million spirit stones to cover up his secret? With a trace of expectation, Feng Yin Taoist Master cast a spell to unlock the mustard seed bag, and sure enough, there was a sparkling and translucent crystal inside, a first-rate mysterious sky crystal. The so-called mysterious sky crystal was a high-level currency issued by the mysterious sky mansion. Usually, the value of a mysterious sky crystal was equivalent to tens of thousands of spirit stones. And the one in Feng Yin's hand was a first-rate mysterious sky crystal that was worth millions of spirit stones. The mysterious sky crystal itself was not particularly precious, but the mysterious sky mansion's strong strength and good reputation supported its price. This large monetary institution was independent of any sect in the Wanxian League, and it was jointly funded by the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League as well as more than 10 other first-rate sections. Its reputation was almost equal to the golden signboard of the Wanxian League, so naturally, its reliability was needless to say. At the same time, the mysterious sky crystal also contained the mysterious sky mansion's unique secret method, which made it extremely difficult to crack the imitation. More importantly, even if the imitation could be cracked for a while, it was absolutely impossible to not be detected by others. Therefore, Feng Yin Taoist Master didn't worry about the authenticity of the mysterious sky crystal. The dignified Shengjing sect, even if they secretly sent a flying sword as a delivery, they wouldn't send a fake one, which would make them a laughingstock. Millions of spirit stones. As a cover-up fee, the Shengjing sect's offer was quite generous. However, just as he was thinking about it, Feng Yin found that there were still several odds and ends in the mustard seed bag. After he poured them out, he was immediately taken aback. Is this donkey meat roast? Looking at the still steaming hot roast meat on the table, Feng Yin Taoist Master deeply wrinkled his brows. He couldn't figure out the significance of this move by the Shengjing sect. Therefore, he put the glasses on the bridge of his nose. The world behind the Kunlun mirror suddenly became different. The line of cause and effect that ran through all things in the world was no longer mysterious in that pair of deep eyes. Feng Yin Taoist Master was surprised for a moment, and then his complexion gradually turned dignified. "Second junior brother, come here." Feng Yin casually said this sentence. A moment later, a sword light flew over from the misty peak, carrying Lu Xian. "Senior brother, what's the matter?" Feng Yin shook his head and threw a donkey meat roast meat to Lu Xian. Lu Xian, baffled, took it and was about to eat it. "Junior brother, don't eat it." Feng Yin anxiously thought, how could that donkey meat roast be eaten? "Can't you see the trick?" Lu Xian was startled, and then he carefully observed the roast meat in his hand. The meat is fine, the fat and lean are evenly distributed, and there's a faint immortal spirit chi in it. Could it be an immortal donkey? Senior brother, where did you find such a strange thing? Feng Yin snorted and pointed at the flying sword from the Shengjing sect as well as the mysterious sky crystal on the table. "Do you understand?" Lu Xian's mind turned, and then he roughly understood the cause and effect. Naturally, he couldn't hold the donkey meat roast in his hand anymore, so he threw it back to his senior brother. "This Shengjing sect is really ruthless," Feng Yin said. "Cruel and merciless? It's much better than being locked in the temple's prison for 100 years. Based on this, after 10 years, he would return to his original form. It's just that, these 10 years would be more difficult to bear. But, this has nothing to do with us. Shangjing's sect sent us this thing because they want us to settle this in private, without making it public. Later on, they would send someone to officially visit them. At that time, as long as we put on a show, the two sects would jointly issue a statement, and then the matter would be over. And I think there's really no need to offend Shangjing's sect for this kind of trivial matter. Junior brother, what do you think? Lu Xian frowned. It's indeed a trivial matter, and there's no loss to us. I think senior brother, you can make the call on this matter. No one would object. Feng Yin said, if it's just to calm things down, I really only need to make the call on Shangjing's sect to reach an agreement. But, junior brother, I think this matter can't just end like this. Senior brother, what do you mean? The White Moon Country is in the Blue River region, and it's not far from our Lingjian school. Moreover, I remember hearing from the wandering disciples that in recent years, the immortal cultivation world in the Blue River region can be described as a foul atmosphere. There are countless cases of swindlers deceiving mortals. Lu Xian nodded. That's also true. The other regions have several sects to suppress the situation, but only the Blue River region has no leader. So, senior brother, do you want to expand the sect's power? Oh, blindly expanding is not good for the Lingjian school, but since we've suppressed the Feng Shui line node in the Blue River region under our sect, we have to shoulder an unshirkable responsibility for the Blue River region. The Shangjing sect's division is just an example, but similar things have happened again and again, so I think this can't be ignored. Lu Xian asked, so, senior brother, how do you plan to deal with this? Can't we just ask the Wanxian League to come forward for this kind of thing? It can be done, but the Lingjian school's 5 uniques title probably can't be kept anymore. In the past 100 years, we've already been criticized. Although there's no need to care about the opinions of outsiders, the 5 uniques title is still useful in many situations. Therefore, it's best for us to deal with this matter ourselves. In any case, the ones who created this kind of low-end scam are just some Tom, Dick, and Harry. Lu Xian snorted. But the number is huge. Just finding these snakes and rats in the vast Blue River region is already a headache. Unless, senior brother, you're willing to sacrifice 10 years of cultivation to deduce your stellar diffraction technique to the extreme and instantly lock all the targets. Feng Yin laughed. Why do we need to do it? Won't there be coolies coming to our door soon? Shangjing sect? Isn't that right? They've been operating the continent-wide strategy for so many years, and they've already planted countless nails in the Blue River region. They should be more familiar with these things than us. That makes sense. Then what about after that? Senior brother, who are you going to send to clean up these maggots? In the end, the Lingjian school is still a bit withered. Is that so? I think there are already a lot of disciples in the sect. This time, we should take this opportunity to send the new disciples who have been in the sect for 10 years out to gain experiential learning. Always staying in the sect for experiential learning would, after all, lack a bit of realism, which is not good for their growth. They should come into contact with the ways of the world in 9 regions, so that their path of immortal cultivation can be smooth and stable. Lu Xian was taken aback. Let the new disciples deal with it? Senior brother, you're... After a pause, Chuan Gong Elder solemnly asked, Senior brother, this is exactly the same as the management training from 100 years ago. Feng Yin laughed. Don't exaggerate it. We're not asking them to go deep into the savage land to expand their territory, but to deal with some small fries in the Blue River region. If they can't even do this, how could they survive in the immortal cultivation world? After all, they're just new disciples. Most of them haven't even reached the middle-level foundation establishment stage. According to the Lingjian school's training policy, if the disciples have reached the high-level foundation establishment stage or above, dealing with those snakes and rats wouldn't be considered as experiential learning. It's just a simple cleaning. Junior brother, you have to have more confidence in the disciples of Spirit Sword Sect. Lu Xian wryly smiled a few times. Obviously, he was still somewhat hesitant. However, since his senior brother had already made up his mind, there was no need to say more. Yes. Senior brother. After that, I'll ask you to take the lead and let the Heavenly Policy Hall come up with an experiential learning plan for me. I want it to be completed by next month. Okay. Chapter 72. Spirit Sword Mountain. Non-phase Peak. In a simple bamboo room, the master and disciple sat opposite to each other. The disciple respectfully poured a cup of hot tea and gave it to his master. His master was flattered. She immediately used more than 10 spells to carefully check the tea. After confirming that there was no poison, she carefully took a sip. It was indeed the tea of non-phase peak. It was bitter and astringent, basically tea residue. His master nodded with satisfaction. His disciple was indeed worthy to be her disciple. The spirit of hard work and plain living was very good. Life should be like this, the more frugal it could be. So, little Wang Lu, looking at your constipated expression, what do you want to ask? Wang Lu, of course, had something to ask. When his master returned from her wandering trip, she brought back a series of surprises. The questions in Wang Lu's mind had already piled up like a mountain. For example, the chivalrous act that was completely incompatible with her temperament, the magical swordsmanship of the king pill that broke the Yuanying stage, or the magical heart of Douge. Too many questions came to his mind at the same time, which made him not know where to start. However, what kind of person was Wang Lu? After thinking for a while, he sorted out the questions, arranged them according to their importance, and then asked the most important question first. Master, what exactly is going on between you and 7th Martial Uncle? The tea in her mouth was completely sprayed on her lapel. The woman in white didn't care that her wet lapel would expose her spring scenery. She asked in inexplicable surprise, "What nonsense are you talking about, you naughty brat? I and 7th Martial Uncle are innocent." Wang Lu nodded. Innocent as milk chocolate? Damn! You're already milk chocolate. How could you be innocent? Where did you learn such dirty thoughts at such a young age? Watch me brainwash you. The woman in white righteously reprimanded her disciple, and then stretched out her finger. An invisible sword chi pierced through the air and stabbed at Wang Lu's forehead. Of course, the sword chi didn't have any lethality. Not only was its strength only 1,000th of the king pill cultivators, it didn't have the sharpness that a sword chi should have. However, if one was stabbed by the sword chi, they would at least have a concussion for 2 or 3 days. However, the moment the sword chi touched his body, Wang Lu's body shook, and the 206 non-phase sword bones spontaneously trembled, completely dispersing the blunt force of the sword chi. Although the strong impact still brought him pain, it didn't matter. This change shocked even his master. Mastery of the 8th level of the sword bone. Kid, your progress is pretty good. It's only been a little more than a month and you've already completed the 8th level. Wait a minute, what are you doing? While speaking, Wang Wu suddenly flicked out another sword chi. This time, the force was still not strong, and the speed was also slow, but it contained a murderous intent. The moment the sharp sword chi shot out, it pierced Wang Lu's primordial spirit, causing a sharp pain in the center of his forehead. However, the physical pain didn't affect his reaction. Wang Lu suddenly raised his right hand and pointed his middle finger forward, just right on top of the sword chi. Bang! After a muffled sound, all the bones in Wang Lu's body trembled, and his internal organs seemed to have been displaced, which made him nauseous. However, in the end, he was able to resolve the power of this sword chi. Not bad. Even a low-level foundation establishment cultivator would be seriously injured by that attack, but you were able to block it unscathed. It shows that you've already passed the first level of the swordbone mastery. This progress is really amazing. As the woman in white spoke, she frowned deeply. It's fine that you've mastered the first 8 levels. You have the aptitude of the void spirit root and are good at experience, so it's not surprising that your cultivation speed exceeded my expectations. But I don't remember teaching you the 9th level of the swordbone mastery. With your current accumulation, it's impossible for you to comprehend it on your own. Who taught you this? Wang Lu replied with difficulty. 7th Martial Uncle. The woman in white suddenly smiled sinisterly. 7th Martial Uncle? Is it that 7th Martial Uncle who has a big tool and is good at living? While I was away, the two of you got along quite well. Wang Lu forced a smile. Isn't that so? 7th Martial Uncle said that 5th Martial Sister's child is his child. Thanks to the adultery between the two of you, I was able to receive Martial Uncle's help and improve my cultivation greatly. Oh, you've become 7th Martial Uncle's child? Is this the posture of worshipping him as your godfather? The vulgar attacks of the master and disciple continued for a long time until a simple and honest black man who was cultivating spiritual plants in Blue Cloud Peak sneezed continuously. Finally, both of them felt bored and stopped talking at the same time. "Say it, what do you want to ask?" Wang Lu looked at the master in front of him who did not have the demeanor of an expert, and then thought of the peerless heroism that disintegrated the Taoist heart of a Yuanying master not long ago. He couldn't help but sigh. "Master, you really hide your strength." His master snorted, took a sip of the crudely made tea, and said, "Of course I can't casually show it to others. That's something that those infatuated girls of the Joyful clan would do. I'm a woman from a good family after all." "No, I'm referring to the duel just now. Master, you've misunderstood." The woman in white once again took a sip of tea, trying to cover up her embarrassment. "You mean that duel? In fact, it's not a big deal. He's just a waste Yuanying stage cultivator, so why make a fuss about it?" "Waste Yuanying stage cultivator?" Casually? Wang Wu said it lightly, but in fact, if Yuanying stage cultivators were really so worthless, they wouldn't be called Yuanying stage old monsters and treated with deep reverence. In fact, more than 90% of the cross-stage challenges in the immortal cultivation world ended in failure or even a crushing defeat. A higher level of cultivation often meant an all-round suppression. How could it be easy to win? What's more, no matter how unbearable Taoist Master Jifeng was, after all, a Yuanying stage cultivator from a famous sect. His foundation was much stronger than those cultivators from third-rate sects or loose cultivators. Therefore, Wang Lu's master's calm victory was so inconceivable. Although he had heard people say that his master seemed to have the reputation of being the #1 king pill in the immortal cultivation world, but even if the rumor was true, it was nothing more than the #1 king pill. There should be a deep gap between the Yuanying stage and the Yuanying stage. Oh, little Wang Lu, you've been deceived by the false common sense of the immortal cultivation world. Don't think of the commonly used stage division in the immortal cultivation world as a pagoda-shaped structure, one layer on top of the other. In fact, after the king pill stage, there's no difference in the level of a cultivator, only the direction is different. The Yuanying stage is not necessarily better than the king pill stage, and the deity stage is not necessarily better than the Yuanying stage. If the cultivator's pursuit of the immortal cultivation world is a distant goal, then whether it's the king pill or the Yuanying stage, they're just different roads leading to the same destination. Master's words were sincere, but Wang Lu felt that this theory was absurd. According to what you said, if there's no difference between the king pill stage and the deity stage, then why do cultivators have to painstakingly pursue a breakthrough in the realm? After advancing to the king pill stage, they could just peacefully cultivate. What's the point of going through so much trouble to break through the realm? Or are you saying that for the past tens of thousands of years, cultivators have been doing useless work? So many amazing geniuses, but none of them have discovered that there's no need to break through the realm. Staying at the king pill stage will allow one to become a true immortal one day? Wang Wu explained, the path of immortal cultivation is full of thorns. When people discovered that following the king pill stage, the Yuanying stage, the deity stage, and the Mahayana stage, they could all become immortals. Who would be so bored to open up a heretical path? No matter how amazing a person is, in front of a mortal's path to the immortal realm, they're still insignificant and lowly. So, after so many years, indeed, no one has discovered this truth. So many people haven't discovered it, only you have. Wang Wu nodded confidently. Yes, I even applied for a patent, but unfortunately, it was rejected. Nonsense, it'd be strange if it wasn't rejected. In fact, my theory is indeed not perfect, but there's one thing I want you to remember. To measure a cultivator's strength, you don't see which path he's standing on, but how far he's walked on this path. And any realm, in fact, contains infinite possibilities. It just depends on whether you have the ability to explore it. Hearing this, Wang Lu had nothing to say. After all, he'd only been cultivating for a little more than 2 years. Whether it was theory or practical experience, he was far from being comparable to his master, let alone arguing with her. Not to mention, her king pill battle record against a Yuanying stage cultivator was right there, which was more powerful than any theory. However, after listening to his master, Wang Lu was very curious. How far had she walked on the path of the king pill? Master, how much strength did you use to defeat Jifeng? His master thought for a moment. At least 1 in 10,000. Isn't this F*King nonsense? If you don't want to say it, then forget it. Wang Lu was too lazy to entangle himself in this useless topic with his master, so he went straight to the point. Master, teach me the non-phase sword art. The previous battle with Taoist Master Ji Feng, for the other disciples of Spirit Sword Sect, was just a jaw-dropping drama. However, in the eyes of Wang Lu, who also cultivated the non-phase method, there were too many tricks. His master was able to use the King Pill to break through the Yuanying stage, and the biggest contributor in that battle was the seemingly mediocre, but in fact, the exquisite non-phase sword art. His master, with a bamboo sword, displayed the power of the King Pill cultivator to the extreme. It was simply breathtaking. And according to his 7th martial uncle, after cultivating the 9th layer of the sword bone, the most important thing was, of course, to cultivate the non-phase heart sutra, which would speed up the accumulation of the surrounding spiritual energy and lay a solid foundation. However, on the other hand, he could also start to practice several fighting methods, such as the non-phase sword art. However, for the newcomers of the low-level chi cultivating stage, the fighting method was not important, especially the pure defensive method of the non-phase method. According to the 5th Elder's idea, the best thing to do was to be like the Valley Hero and focus on advancing to the high-level chi cultivating stage in 1 or 2 years, and then she could go to the sect leader to show off her painstaking efforts in teaching her disciple, and then swindle the bounty. In view of this, Wang Lu very directly put forward his application, lest his master taught him a force-feeding method, which would be bad for him. As a result, his master actually readily nodded, and then, "Okay, which one do you want to learn?" Wang Lu was suddenly startled. "How many do you have?" "I don't dare to say too many, but I definitely have more than 20. Thinking of his master's 100% original, unscrupulous, and more than 100 versions of the non-phase heart method, Wang Lu could not help but feel powerless. "Can you help me get rid of a few wrong answers?" His master smiled. "That being the case, I'll recommend you 2 sets of non-phase sword art. However, the threshold for these 2 sets of non-phase sword art is very high. One requires the cultivator to have great perseverance, and the other requires great wisdom. I don't know if you..." "I choose the great wisdom." Wang Lu made a prompt decision, full of confidence. If he chose the great perseverance, he would have to cultivate for 100 years to reach the small success level, then he would have to cultivate for a fart. "Oh, you choose the great wisdom type, it's actually very suitable for your opportunistic style." After his master evaluated him maliciously, she said, "But this doesn't mean that perseverance can be abandoned. On the contrary, perhaps this road will be more difficult than great perseverance." "Because I haven't gone through it." Wang Lu suddenly spurted out his saliva. "You haven't practiced the sword art, yet you have the nerve to teach me?" His master confidently said, "Nonsense, who stipulates that the master must have practiced the kung fu when teaching the disciple? The Heavenly Sword Hall's male elders are now teaching the female successor disciples. Don't tell me that before teaching them how to chop a red dragon, they must first find a red dragon to practice?" Wang Lu was suddenly speechless. "Humph, young man, you still have no experience." It was rare for his disciple to choke to death, so his master was very satisfied. "Very well, I will teach you the 2nd set of the 17th edition of the non-phase sword art. With your current cultivation base, as long as you can practice the first 3 layers, it would be difficult for cultivators below the foundation establishment stage to pose a threat to you. And if combined with the non-phase heart sutra, you can speed up your chi cultivating stage cultivation base, supporting your basic attributes. Even a middle-level foundation establishment stage cultivator would find it difficult to hurt you." "Oh, so cool. Isn't it cool? Otherwise, why do you think I can use the King Pill to break through the Yuanying stage? For us, the non-phase peak cultivators, if you can't challenge someone of a higher level, then your cultivation base has failed. Well, without further ado, you have 3 months to practice the first 3 layers of the non-phase sword art and advance your cultivation base to the 7th level of the chi cultivating stage." "Wait a minute. Reach the 7th level of the chi cultivating stage in 3 months? Master, are you trying to force me to my death?" Normally, it would take at least 1.5 to 2 years to reach the 7th level, right? Humph, how could a cultivator with a dignified void spirit root compare to those wretches? Rest assured, with your rich accumulation, it's easy for you to walk the road that would take others 1 or 2 years to walk in 3 months. Damn, where did my accumulation come from? This void spirit root is purely a drag. Moreover, Now that the basic structure has been changed by your non-phase sword bone, my cultivation speed is only at the level of 2nd or 3rd rank spirit root, okay? In short, young man, don't complain and work hard. 3 months later, if you can't reach the 7th level of the chi cultivating stage and the 3rd layer of the non-phase sword art, hey, when the time comes, don't blame your master for not urging you. 3 months later. What's the matter? I don't know any stellar diffraction technique. How could I know what will happen in 3 months? So, you can completely not believe every word I say. Chapter 73. I don't know the stellar diffraction technique, so how could I know what will happen in the future? Therefore, little Wang Lu, you can completely not believe every word I say. Wang Wu's shameless attitude of a dead pig not afraid of boiling water made her disciple Wang Lu helpless. From their 2 years of experience together, Wang Wu was really not a trustworthy person. The most typical example was 2 years ago when he applied for a long-term meal ticket to the Misty Peak cafeteria. At that time, she boasted that the Misty Peak cafeteria was the supreme example of the Western continent cuisine. When Wang Lu excitedly rushed into the cafeteria with the meal ticket, he was immediately cursed by the look up at the starry sky fish heads. However, to say that she was not trustworthy. Just a day ago, the 6 Heavenly Sword Hall elders endorsed her at the same time. Feng Yin Taoist masters, I believe her, was so domineering. In any case, regardless of whether Taoist master Jifeng believed it or not, they all believed it. Thinking to this, Wang Lu could only sigh in his heart, thinking, I'll believe her one more time. Then, it was time for intense and fulfilling cultivation. According to Wang Wu's requirement, Wang Lu had to break through 3 stages in 3 months, all the way until he reached the 7th level of chi cultivating stage. Among them, the most important one was naturally the non-phase method. For the vast majority of cultivators in the immortal cultivation world, the non-phase method, which taught the cultivators how to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy, transform it into magical power, and directly enhance the cultivation of the immortal cultivation stage, was usually called the core method, which was the foundation of all cultivation. The content of the core method was the most extensive and also the most difficult. Cultivators spent a lot of energy on the core method. As for the non-phase sword method, although his master also required it, it actually belonged to the minor details. However, when Wang Lu actually practiced it, he was surprised to find that the non-phase method was the most effortless. Because this cultivation method was simply too strange. He had been in the school for more than 2 years. Even though he had no luck with most of the skills in the Lingjian school because of his spiritual root, but even if he had not eaten pork, he would still have seen a pig run. The most important reason for the difficulty of cultivating the core skills was that there were too many unfathomable and indescribable contents in the skills of immortal cultivation that required the cultivators to comprehend on their own. Most of the time, how to breathe in and out spiritual energy, how to circulate it, and how to transform it into spiritual energy was just a feeling. The predecessors who invented the cultivation method tried their best to describe this feeling in words and passed it on to their descendants. However, this method of information transmission was inevitably prone to errors. Furthermore, cultivators had different physiques and opportunities. Even if they cultivated the same cultivation technique, they would have completely different experiences. It was very difficult to find a universal formula that could lead all cultivators on the right path. At this time, even if a master came to teach them, the cultivators would still feel at a loss, like a blind man touching an elephant. Every step on the path of cultivation would be difficult. Taking the chi cultivating stage as an example, the most important step was to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy to nourish the inner mansion, to form the circulation of spiritual energy within the body, to transform the magical power, and then to evolve the inner mansion into the jade mansion, to create the node that connects the inside and outside. For the common core skills, there were too many steps that the cultivators needed to try bit by bit. For example, the speed of absorbing spiritual energy, the method to form the circulation, the scale, the structure of each person's inner mansion was different, so the location to form the circulation would also be different. Even if it was the simplest and most universal cultivation method, free and unfettered wander, there were still countless hazy and vague places, which made it difficult to clearly explain the correct cultivation method. However, the non-phase method could. How to use the golden liquid extracted from the 206 sword bones to form the circulation, where to gather the golden liquid in the inner mansion, how much strength to drive the energy, how to form the whirlpool at what speed, what diameter. The explanation of each step was so detailed that it could make one's hair stand on end. Moreover, it was completely tailor-made, so Wang Lu only needed to practice it step by step. There was no room for hesitation. Regarding this point, Wang Wu didn't take credit for it. Actually, it's not that difficult. Although your void spirit root is particularly troublesome when it comes to absorbing spiritual energy, it is, after all, the #1 spirit root in the immortal cultivation world. In other aspects, it's also top-notch. Therefore, when designing the cultivation method, as long as you are set as an ideal cultivator, and then deduced according to the most ideal theory, it's just an armchair strategist. You don't even need to test it before you can directly practice it. Of course, this method is only suitable for you. If it's another cultivator, they would probably explode and die in less than half a day. Ha ha ha. What the hell are you laughing at? You're a Frankenstein who uses your apprentice as a human experiment. In any case, as the core skill of the non-phase method, there was basically no difficulty. His cultivation speed was exceptionally astonishing. In just 10 days, Wang Lu had already constructed the simplest small circulation in his body and completed the 9th level of qi cultivating stage. If this continued, then within 3 months, advancing to the 7th level of qi cultivating stage would also be easy. The next step was the non-phase sword art. According to Wang Lu's choice, his master taught him a set of second-form non-phase sword art. This set of sword art was indeed like what his master said. Only those with great wisdom could practice it. Because the design idea of this sword art was to gather the essence of all the sword art in the world, omnipotent. At the same time, one must have insight into the flaws of all things, all-conquering. Just listening to this guiding idea, Wang Lu immediately associated it with all kinds of perpetual motion machines, water-to-oil and other such things. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that it was unreliable. Fortunately, his master quickly continued, "Of course, that belongs to the ideal state of the non-phase sword art. For you, it may seem illusory, but people who cultivate the immortal cultivation path always have a lofty ideal. As for how to combine it with reality, that's another matter." Wang Lu suddenly understood. It's to build the second form non-phase sword art with Wang Wu's characteristic. Why didn't you say so earlier? However, when his master really taught him the method to practice the first form non-phase sword art, Wang Lu felt that he was being cheated. The first form non-phase sword art is very simple. You just need to find 50 or 60 sets of second or third class sword art from the mortal world, practice them one by one, and master them. Where am I going to find 50 or 60 sets of sword art from the mortal world? Well, this isn't it. While his master said, she pulled out a large pile of worn-out sword manuals from nowhere. These are the high-quality martial arts that I bought from the mortal world at a sky-high price. Practice them well. Don't let down your master's painstaking efforts. Wang Lu's face was full of suspicion. Ignoring the dust on the pile of books, he reached out to look at them. Free Cloud Sword Art, Lying Corpse Sword Art, Yu Sword Art. Damn, aren't these just beginner sword arts? Do you think I don't understand the classification of martial arts in the mortal world? At least give me 2 sets of Winding Finger Soft Sword and Fallen Flower Divine Sword. He continued to look, and this time he found a piece of paper, which read, Scripture Pavilion's products must be high quality, limited time discount, a stack of 10 taels. Wang Lu immediately looked up, but his master had already disappeared. Although he always felt that he was cheated by his master, in the next half a month, Wang Lu still honestly practiced these dozens of beginner sword arts one by one. It was reasonable to say that even if it was just a beginner sword art, it would be difficult to achieve success without 3 to 5 years of practice. However, Wang Lu had been soaked in the changing muscle and washing marrow soup to become a rare martial arts genius, and he also had the foundation of non-phase sword bone. Thus, his cultivation speed was far from that of an ordinary person. 10 days later, he was able to use these dozens of sword arts. And in these 10 days, Wang Lu gradually realized his master's intention. Although these beginner sword arts were easy to understand and their actual combat value was not high, they were the summary of the mortal world's martial arts world for hundreds of thousands of years. They were the most suitable for a newcomer to understand the sword theory and reach the next level in the way of the sword. Although Wang Lu had previously learned the soft cloud sword, his understanding was only at the technical level, and he did not comprehend the deeper content of the way of the sword. Through the practice of these dozens of sword arts with different characteristics, Wang Lu gradually figured out that there were some common principles among these sword arts. Although this feeling was still very vague, according to his master, this was the first level of the non-phase sword art. In her own words, This level was more of a theoretical study, and it was still far from actual combat. Therefore, although Wang Lu had practiced the first level of the non-phase sword art, it was not as good as the soft cloud sword. This was probably why a full 6-star sword art was not as good as a full 4-star sword art. The following second level was exactly the same as the first level. It was still a theoretical discussion, and did not involve actual combat. It was just that the beginner's sword art became the middle-level sword art that was circulated in the mortal world's martial arts world, like the famous sword art of each sect. The only difference was that the wholesale price was increased from 10 taels of silver to 1,000 taels of silver. He didn't know what kind of god this scripture pavilion was, that they could even sell the middle-level sword art in bulk. The level of the sword art increased, and its variation and power also increased exponentially, but the difficulty of practicing it did not increase by much. After 10 days, dozens of middle-level sword arts were overcome by Wang Lu one by one, and he was very clear about them. Then, when Wang Lu confidently challenged the third level, the situation changed a lot. According to his master's overall plan, the third level would be the embryonic form of the non-phase sword art, and the initial ability to use it in actual combat, and this initial was the standard of the immortal cultivation world. If it was in the mortal world, the third level of the non-phase sword art could surpass any of the mortal world's top sword art. As for the method of practicing it, it's very simple. You have to master the hundreds of sword arts that you have learned before, deeply understand the truth, and then combine it with your own actual situation to create your own. Even if it's the embryonic form of the second level of the non-phase sword art, the third level would also be completed. Create my own sword art? Wang Lu simply couldn't believe it. Isn't it very democratic, very free, and very universal? Universal, your sister. Hurry up and give me a set of autocratic dictatorship like the non-phase method. As a result, his master sighed. Unfortunately, I'm not joking about this issue. Non-phase sword art and non-phase method are two different things. The first few levels of non-phase method are the foundation of the immortal cultivation world. In simple terms, it's the unity of man and nature. As long as the sky doesn't change and the people don't change, naturally, a set of fixed correct answer can be summed up to tell you how to practice it. However, the sword art is a method of facing the enemy, a method of actual combat, with endless variations. How could there be a set of fixed routines? Therefore, you need to explore and comprehend it yourself, to find the path that suits you. Thinking back, I, your master, also walked step by step like this. For you to have the guidance of a famous teacher, you are already many times luckier than your master. Therefore, brave young man, quickly find your own path. F***CK. My path is to trample your pretentious face under my feet. The cultivation of the third level of the non-phase sword art was very slow. From the time when his master set the 3-month deadline, more than a month had passed. The cultivation of the non-phase method had steadily progressed. Now, his cultivation base was already at the 8th rank, and the 7th rank was also within sight. In addition, the various mortal world sword arts required for the first 2 levels of the sword art had almost reached the master level. Unfortunately, there wasn't even a shadow of the 3rd level of the sword art. Originally, when it came to martial arts, Wang Lu had the best teacher, the lady boss of a certain inn. However, now that he urgently needed her help, the lady boss had mysteriously disappeared, and he couldn't find her. After inquiring about it in the Spirit Creek town, he found out that she actually went to the nearby village to purchase goods. Holy **T, your average daily turnover is more than 10,000 yuan. What kind of goods do you want to purchase? If you can sell it, then there's a ghost. Ha! On second thought, Wang Lu realized that it was probably because of his overeating in the inn, which used up too much of the stored food, which forced the lady boss to go out to purchase goods. He really reaped what he sowed. Without help, he could only rely on himself. However, creating his own sword art was easier said than done. Although in the past month, through continuous cultivation of the sword art, Wang Lu had a considerable understanding of the way of the sword, and the shadow of the sword was faintly left in his heart, but using this as the foundation to create a set of sword art that was suitable for himself, it was extremely difficult. Of course, with Wang Lu's talent and perception, if he really wanted to create it, it was not impossible. By tinkering with the existing materials, he could also integrate a set of new sword art that was far superior to the middle level of the mortal world sword art. However, according to his master, This self-created sword art would become the foundation of his practice for a long time in the future. So, what was the point of deceiving himself on this issue? Since he had the void spirit root, since he was a professional adventurer, since he had this and that special thing, then either he didn't do it, or he did it to the best of his ability. According to his master, the second level of the non-phase sword art was a test of great wisdom. Then, he would use his own supreme perception to break through this hurdle. Isn't it just 100 sets of mortal world sword art? Let me use my supreme deduction power to simulate and experiment them one by one in my mind, and finally come up with a result. Therefore, in the next few days, Wang Lu was like a lovelorn teenager, meditating on the way of the sword all day long, and then sighing and tossing and turning, unable to sleep. One day, Wang Lu was absent-minded. Like a wandering spirit in the daytime, he staggered down the non-phase peak. Using the sect's shrinking array, he came to the small square of the misty peak and swayed left and right toward the cafeteria. Along the way, many of his senior brothers and senior sisters who knew him were scared by him. He didn't respond to their greetings, ignored them when they called his name, and even waved their hands in front of his eyes, but none of them could make his pair of vacant eyes focus. Some people thought that he was possessed by the devil and hurriedly went to find the sect's elder. As a result, Elder Lu Xian hurriedly flew over to take a look and scolded. Non-phase Peak's idiot is trying to impress the crowd again. None of you care about him. Very well, since Elderly said so, then let's just ignore him. However, looking at the young red and white disciple with a dazed look rushing into the Misty Peak cafeteria, it was really unbearable. Several Spirit Sword sect disciples looked at Wang Lu with pity, and then looked at the new signboard hanging at the entrance of the Misty Peak cafeteria. Family reciprocation, sincere reward, brand new dish, please taste. They couldn't help but shed tears of sympathy. Chapter 74. Unknowingly, he walked toward the Misty Peak cafeteria. Wang Lu didn't realize that there was a bottomless abyss in front of him. His whole mind was devoted to the deduction of his swordsmanship. In his mind, each and every one of the little people brandished their swords and sometimes fought with each other. As a bystander, Wang Lu could learn from them and extract valuable experience. Not long ago, Wang Lu also discovered that he actually had this kind of ability. Perhaps it was the non-phase sword bone, especially the emperor bone, that effectively improved his IQ, or perhaps it was the non-phase method that absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy and initially condensed his primordial spirit. In short, since he had this ability, he should use it to his heart's content. Wasn't this how great wisdom came about? And when Wang Lu deduced the reclining corpse sword art against the free cloud sword art for the 15th time and was intoxicated by the new flaw of the free cloud sword art, suddenly, his body was slapped by someone. With a violent shake, that mysterious realm was shattered. Damn, who is it? With a face full of anger, Wang Lu returned to the real world. He found himself sitting in the middle of the Misty Peak cafeteria. A petite but heroic blonde girl was staring at him with her green eyes. Excuse me, what do you need? Wang Lu looked around and found that he was the only guest in the cafeteria. Inwardly, he cursed, guessing that he had inadvertently broken into a dragon's pool and a tiger's den. The 4 forbidden areas of the Spirit Sword Mountain, the sect leader's bedroom, the pink house, the sword tomb, and the new Misty Peak cafeteria. This is really courting death. Wang Lu silently sang an elegy to himself, and then resolutely said, if you have something new here, bring it to me. In the cultivation of the sword, the most important thing was to have the indomitable momentum of a sword. Whether you are the 13 tycoons looking up at the starry sky or the 1 million kings pulling out the sword in the stone, I, your father, will eat you today. Hearing Wang Lu's words, the little bit of unhappiness on the young chef's face suddenly disappeared and was replaced with a pleasantly surprised smile. Very good. Today, I just launched a new dish, inspired by my distant hometown. With the lake as the theme, it has a very memorable value. Damn it, I, your father, am not a Western continent person. Why do I need the commemorative value? Anyway, don't worry. The dish this time will definitely give you a pleasant surprise. The girl made the promise in an imposing manner. Then, without asking anything else, she quickly walked back to the kitchen to prepare the new lake-themed dish. A moment later, when Wang Lu subconsciously wanted to enter the meditation to deduce the sword art, the blonde girl came out of the meditation room. In her hand was a porcelain pot that seemed very large compared to her size. She then firmly placed it on the table with a proud look on her face. "Have a taste. This is my masterpiece." Wang Lu trembled with fear as he looked at the dark green soup in the huge porcelain pot. Regardless of the strange smell, or the occasional bubbles, just the suspicious meatball floating in the middle of the soup was enough to make people unable to let go of it no matter what. Wang Lu cautiously asked, "May I ask if your dish, is it a Loch Ness monster?" The girl frowned. "No, it's a lake elf." "Don't you think the appearance of this elf is a bit strange?" The girl continued to frown. "Is it?" "You'd better eat it quickly, or it won't taste good when it gets cold." "No, I'm sure this thing should be frozen to absolute zero for it to be the most suitable." However, when Wang Lu put a spoonful of the soup into his mouth with the courage to overcome all obstacles, he was surprised to find that it didn't seem that bad. Although it was far from delicious, and it couldn't be compared to a certain girl who was good at cooking at the Rue Family Inn, but, compared to the stargazy pie and other dishes that had been deceiving him for years, it had made great progress. After repeatedly confirming that his taste buds did not betray his master, Wang Lu very straightforwardly gave her a thumbs up. The girl's smile bloomed in a flash, almost like the blooming of spring flowers, completely covering the horror of the dark green soup on the table. "Thank you for your appreciation. I will continue to work hard and live up to the expectations of the customers." Then she returned to the kitchen in high spirits to make other dishes. Wang Lu drank a few spoonfuls of the lake elf, but because his taste buds weren't that strong, he quickly became engrossed in the deductions of swordsmanship. After an unknown amount of time, Wang Lu, who had finished his deductions, turned his attention back to reality, only to find the green-eyed girl standing in front of him with a disappointed expression. There were a few dishes on the table, but they had all gone cold without exception. And although Wang Lu held a spoon and chopsticks in his hands, he hadn't touched them at all. "Sigh, as expected, it still doesn't work?" The girl sighed very sadly, quietly admitting her failure. For a proud person like her, this kind of feeling was really painful and indescribable. Looking at the girl's disappointment and pain, Wang Lu thought for a moment, feeling as if he had inadvertently become a demon who destroyed a flower and played with a girl's heart. According to the rules of the sect, it seemed that he had violated the precept of lust. Although this was really an unintentional mistake, professional adventurers should dare to take responsibility for their actions. "Since I played with your heart, I will take responsibility for it to the end." "Actually, I was just distracted just now." The girl nodded firmly. "I can understand. Brilliant warriors will use distraction to relieve pain, and it is my fault that I brought you so much pain. I really don't have the talent." "Wait, girl, you misunderstood. Actually it's like this." Wang Lu simply told her about his current failure in swordsmanship, and the problem of being in a trance all day. This was easier to win people's trust. But after saying this, he found that the girl was looking at him with great surprise. "You know swordsmanship?" Damn, Wang Lu was immediately unhappy. This question seemed to be lamenting. "Even pigs can climb trees?" "In any case, you are a true disciple of a swordsmanship sect. If you don't know swordsmanship, should I show you the nine-toothed harrow?" Although the aptitude of the void spirit root is a bit of a pain in the ass, there is no need to look down on people like this. Realizing that she had misspoken, the girl covered her mouth and then explained, "No, I'm just surprised. Since you know swordsmanship, why use such an immature method to cultivate your swordsmanship?" Wang Lu said, "How is it immature? Using superior intelligence to deduce swordsmanship, increasing efficiency and reducing cost, what's wrong with that?" The girl thought for a moment, and then somewhat stiffly replied, "Swordsmanship is not thought of, but used." Wang Lu sighed. "My swordsmanship is different. It needs great wisdom to practice." The girl pondered for a long time this time, until Wang Lu was about to get up to pay the bill. She said, "I remember, even in the language of you 9 regions people, wisdom and intelligence are two completely different words." Wang Lu was stunned when he heard this. Intelligence, wisdom. There seemed to be a flash of light in the dark. The girl slightly frowned and continued, "Intelligence is mostly innate, while wisdom is mostly acquired experience. Since it needs great wisdom to cultivate, it should rely more on experience, in other words actual combat experience. How can you blindly think about it?" "Well said, it's really enlightening." Upon hearing this, the light in Wang Lu's mind had already spread into the sunlight, and all the haze had vanished. It was indeed as the girl said. Unfortunately, He had been anxious for so many days that he didn't see through it. Swordsmanship had to be practiced, and he had already accumulated enough theoretical foundation after many days of deduction. The only thing he lacked was actual combat experience. It was just that. The practice of swordsmanship obviously couldn't be done behind closed doors. It was best to have someone who could guide him. He didn't need to be very strong, but at the very least, he had to be proficient in the way of the sword. He had practiced more than 100 swordsmanship, but he still couldn't enter the way, so the other party must have mastered more swordsmanship than that, right? Although many of the senior brothers and sisters in the sect had amazing strength, profound cultivation, and especially sharp swordsmanship, their attainments in the way of the sword might not be very high. Swordsmanship and the way of the sword were two different things. Normally, the best person to guide him would undoubtedly be the lady boss, but now she wasn't here. While thinking, he saw a pair of green eyes out of the corner of his eye, and an idea flashed in Wang Lu's mind. Didn't he have a ready-made one? Although he hadn't seen this girl fight before, and he didn't know her depth, just now she had seen through the mysteries of the way of the sword and enlightened him. If she wasn't an expert, then who was? Some loser who couldn't even get out of bed in the afternoon and didn't even have 2 sets of clothes to change into? Ah! You want me to help you practice swordsmanship? The girl chef who was cleaning the dishes looked at Wang Lu in surprise. She didn't expect him to make such a request. After a moment of hesitation, the girl shook her head. I'm just a chef. I can't help you with anything. How could Wang Lu believe this? He waved the long-term meal ticket in his hand. For the sake of an old customer, please do me a favor. It's a sincere offer. Frightened by the rare long-term meal ticket, the girl stammered, but. Wang Lu couldn't be bothered to say more. He directly pulled out the purple soft sword from his waist and stabbed at the girl's shoulder. The other party didn't expect Wang Lu to make a move just like that. She was really surprised, especially with the bowl and chopsticks in her hand. It was inconvenient for her to dodge. But the next moment, the girl held the bowl and chopsticks steadily with one hand, and with the other she held a chopstick. She lightly touched the tip of Wang Lu's soft sword and blocked it. When the sword didn't hit, Wang Lu took advantage of the situation to withdraw the soft sword, but he was amazed in his heart. As expected of a great hidden expert. The sword he used just now was not the soft cloud sword technique, but the heaven and earth sword technique's one sword determines the heaven and earth. It was full of power. With his chi cultivating stage 8 cultivation, even a first-rate martial artist wouldn't be able to block it. But he didn't expect that the golden-haired girl only used a chopstick to easily block the sword. If this wasn't an expert, then who was? So, without waiting for the girl to put down the bowl and chopsticks, Wang Lu very straightforwardly knelt on the ground. Master, please accept this disciple's bow. Whoosh! The dishes and bowls fell to the ground. Chapter 75. Master, please accept this disciple's kowtow. Wang Lu successfully used this trick to cause a heavy loss of several tableware to the Misty Peak cafeteria, which made the young chef somewhat lost her wits. How can this be? I just came to Lingzhen school as a guest to learn. How can I overstep my authority and become your master? Moreover, don't you 9 regions people attach the most importance to the master's inheritance? Wouldn't this damage the dignity of a master? Wang Lu smiled and said, My master doesn't even have a personality. How could she have dignity? Don't worry, no harm. But the young girl obviously couldn't accept it. Wang Lu didn't say much. He bent down and was about to kowtow again. Okay, I understand. If it's just a swordsmanship practice, I have no problem. But I'm not your master, and you're not my disciple. Wang Lu smiled. Okay. Thus, that afternoon, Wang Lu experienced the fierceness of this Western continent girl. In the Misty Peak cafeteria, she had only been in Lingzhen school for 4 years. During this period, she rarely went out and never showed her ability to outsiders. Therefore, even Wang Lu didn't expect that this girl was actually so powerful. At the Misty Peak's training field, Wang Lu, armed with the purple soft sword, faced the wooden sword-wielding girl, put out all of his skills. Using the soft cloud sword and winding step as the foundation, he blended all of his 1 month's experience in swordsmanship, combined with the 9th layer of the non-phase sword bone, as well as the 8th level chi cultivating stage core method. When he went all out in defense, Wang Lu was confident that even a low-level foundation establishment cultivator would have a big headache. However, in the face of such a powerful defense of Wang Lu, the blonde girl only used 3 sword strikes to disintegrate it. The first sword strike was straight at the top of Wang Lu's head. The wooden sword was as heavy as Mount Tai, which broke a hole in Wang Lu's defense on the spot. The second strike was still aimed straight at his head. The momentum of Wang Lu's sword was scattered, and his chi and blood were in turmoil. The third strike was aimed straight at his head, and the purple myrtle flexible sword flew out of his hand, causing Wang Lu's final struggle to end in failure. After 3 strikes, Wang Lu was completely convinced. The girl did not rely on pure brute force to win. Her strength was at most equal to Wang Lu's, but she was able to win with 3 strikes. These 3 strikes seemed simple, but who knew how many tricks were hidden in the subtleties? At the same time, Wang Lu could see the uniqueness of the girl's swordsmanship from these 3 strikes. According to the standard of 9 regions, this girl was undoubtedly a very different kind of swordsman. Her swordsmanship did not have a well-formed routine. Just now, those 3 sword moves were just like a heavenly steed flying in the sky, but each sword strike fell on the vital point. Every movement of her whole body was exquisite and peerless. In a more vulgar way, it could be said that no move was better than having a move. However, according to the lady boss's theory, how could there be any swordsmanship in the world that could surpass a move without a move? If one couldn't even practice the basic skill, then one might as well light a firecracker under one's butt. It was not that there was no swordsman who could surpass a move without a move, but the premise was that his swordsmanship had reached perfection. The swordsmanship of the Western continent was very different from that of the 9 regions. There were not too many schools of swordsmanship, but after all, there was a quite mature swordsmanship system. Not long ago, the lady boss had nothing to do, so she explained the mystery of it to Wang Lu and personally demonstrated it. However, the blonde girl's swordsmanship was also completely different from those mature systems. Quoting the lady boss's point of view again, in this world, if one wanted to enter the realm of no move was better than having a move without practicing swordsmanship, then there was only one way. A veteran of hundreds of battles. Even the lady boss did not want to be the enemy of those who reached the peak through this road. In other words, this blonde cook was at least on the same level as the lady boss. Of course, this could also be seen from her breasts. All in all, with such a great expert around, there was no need to worry about the cultivation of swordsmanship. Just now, he was defeated in 3 moves, but after he closed his eyes to reflect on the 3 moves, he felt that he had gained a lot. Many conclusions that needed to be deduced countless times in his mind were naturally comprehended now. Again. The girl smiled faintly and gripped her wooden sword tightly again. Then, she swung it down again. This time, Wang Lu was still defeated in 3 strikes. However, on the 3rd strike, the girl didn't aim for his head. Instead, she aimed for his chest. After 3 strikes, the young girl nodded her head in satisfaction. Not bad, not bad. Your comprehension is really good. With a disciple like you. Halfway through her words, she realized that she had made a slip of the tongue and immediately shut her mouth. Unfortunately, it was too late. Wang Lu suddenly jumped up. Haha, you finally admit that I'm your disciple. The girl was flabbergasted. I didn't. Haha, you obviously have it. What's there to be shy about? I'm just taking in a disciple, not asking you to get married. You should just obediently obey me. Humph. The girl didn't say anything else. She raised her wooden sword and swung it down. However, this time, she didn't limit her strength. With 1 strike, she knocked away Wang Lu's purple soft sword. Humph, how can a loser who can't even take 1 strike be qualified to be my disciple? Damn, you're just acting shamelessly, okay? You talk too much. She swung her sword again. The wind from the sword was so sharp that Wang Lu couldn't say anything. For the next month, Wang Lu began the harsh cultivation of swordsmanship under this unjustifiable master-disciple relationship. The word harsh was not an exaggeration. The golden-haired girl wasn't a kind teacher. It could even be said that she didn't know how to teach her disciple. Her foundation in swordsmanship was excellent and she had received very orthodox training. However, what really allowed her to reach the peak of swordsmanship was the accumulation of thousands of battles. Therefore, for her, the cultivation of swordsmanship was nothing more than actual combat. Therefore, the method she taught her swordsmanship was only 1 move, to let Wang Lu remember it with his body. Simply put, it was to beat Wang Lu in every possible way, so that the other party would grow in pain. As for Wang Lu, to be honest, he wasn't afraid of pain. Although every time he was hit by the wooden sword, he would wonder which old dog he had cultivated his 9th layer non-phase sword bone. Obviously, even a low-rank level 3 monster couldn't break his defense, so why was it that every time he was stabbed by the golden-haired girl's wooden sword, he would feel a heart-wrenching pain? However, Wang Lu actually didn't mind the pain on his body. Because every time he felt pain, it meant that his swordsmanship had made great progress. The golden-haired girl was indeed not a qualified teacher, but Wang Lu was a superb student. The only problem was that, in the Misty Peaks martial arts practice field, he had been beaten by a golden-haired girl for a month in a row, which made him lose a lot of face. Fortunately, Wang Lu was a disciple of the non-phase peak, so he didn't care much about face. Although in the beginning, he was still criticized by the Misty Peaks inner court disciples, but later on, several Foundation establishment disciples who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth came to challenge the golden-haired girl and were beaten by her with one sword strike. After that, there were no more nosy people. 1 month passed by quickly. On this day, Wang Lu performed exceptionally. The purple soft sword was shaken by him like a long whip, soft and flexible. The golden-haired girl attacked 10 times in a row, and each sword strike had the power to split a mountain, but she couldn't break through Wang Lu's sword defense. Although in the end, Wang Lu found it difficult to continue, the girl nodded with satisfaction, retreated a few steps, and no longer attacked. Amazing, in just 1 month you have progressed to this level, your talent is really amazing. After Wang Lu blocked the 10 sword strikes, his whole body relaxed, and he took a long breath. This 3 feet sword defense can barely be considered as the initial stage. The golden-haired girl nodded. With your current swordsmanship, it is almost impossible for ordinary people to break your sword defense. However, this swordsmanship is only suitable for the duel between martial artists. According to the standard of your immortal path, it can only be regarded as the entry level. It's good enough to be able to enter the entry level. In the future, I will slowly enrich and perfect it. At least, I have built a reliable framework. The non-phase sword art was undoubtedly broad and profound. When practiced to the realm of his master Wang Wu, a bamboo sword could resist all kinds of spells of a Taoist master of Yuanying stage outside the sword defense. That was truly the realm of one sword breaking 10,000 methods. Now, Wang Lu had only cultivated for 2 months, so naturally, he could not break 10,000 methods. However, the road was walked step by step. Now that he had reached the 3rd layer, at least in the mortal world, he could barely be regarded as one sword breaking 10,000 methods. For a month, although the golden-haired girl only used a wooden sword to fight with him, the wooden sword in her hand gave birth to endless changes. Sometimes it was as heavy as a heavy hammer or a giant axe, and sometimes it was as light as a silver chain or a golden bell. When Wang Lu fought with her, it was as if he was fighting against thousands of experts, gaining many precious experiences. This 3 feet sword defense was also initially formed under the continuous stimulation. Indeed, from the current situation, it was only at the mortal world level. Under the 3 feet sword defense, it could block 18 kinds of weapons, but it might not be able to block a fireball from a 9th level chi cultivating stage cultivator. But as a basic framework, this was already good enough. With just a mere 3rd layer, he could not expect too much. Not to mention, if he really encountered a 9th level chi cultivating stage fireball, why would he need to use pure swordsmanship to block it? Was the 9th layer sword bone and the 7th grade chi cultivating stage just for show? When the time came, he could reach out and extinguish the fireball without the slightest bit of trouble. In short, his master's task could be considered to have been successfully completed 10 days earlier than expected. It could be seen that he was indeed worthy to be a void spirit root cultivator. He was born to create miracles and set records. With the completion of the task, Wang Lu could finally loosen up his tense heart for the past month. Therefore, he finally could not hold back. He looked at the golden-haired girl and asked her a question that he had wanted to ask for a long time. "Miss, what is your surname?" The golden-haired girl was dumbfounded. The wooden sword in her hand fell to the ground with a clatter. "So you don't know my name?" The girl sighed. She felt that in this 1 month, being a cheap master was a bit of a loss. And as Wang Lu's disciple, he was indeed a bit heartless. As she said in the beginning, she didn't come to Spirit Sword Mountain to be a master. It's just that this Wang Lu was indeed to her liking. Moreover, his talent in swordsmanship was too good, so she couldn't help but feel itchy. Thus, half as a sparring partner and half as a master, she decided to teach him. Wang Lu also felt that this matter seemed a bit unreasonable. Looking at the girl's brilliant blonde hair, he tentatively said, Master Jean? The girl felt that her vision turned black. It was quite similar to the time when she tasted her own dishes a few years ago. Just call me Aya. Oh, hello Aya. After a period of awkward run-in, the two were finally able to carry out a normal exchange. What kind of exchange? It was nothing more than life experience and the like. Wang Lu had long wanted to ask, but it was inconvenient for him to open his mouth. However, it was useless to ask, because Aya didn't intend to tell him those personal secrets. She simply answered the question. Aya, you have such a brilliant skill. You should be a famous big shot in the Western continent. Why did you come here to be a chef? To promote the Western continent culture and strengthen the food exchange? Aya said, I didn't come here specifically to be a chef. It's just that there is something I need in 9 regions, so I have to come. What is it? Elixir of immortality? More or less. Aya looked a bit sad. She shook her head and didn't say much. In short, the elders of Lingjian School have helped me a lot. They collected a lot of precious resources that I couldn't collect with my own strength. And I have nothing to repay them with, so I can only do what I can. Wang Lu found it hard to understand. Your so-called what you can do is to use your amazing skill to destroy the taste buds of spirit sword sect's disciples? However, before he could ask more, a heavy and loud bell directly blasted in Wang Lu's mind. What the hell? Wang Lu jumped 3 feet high. This was the bell that gathered all the disciples of Lingjian School. Moreover, it rang 3 times in a row, which belonged to the relatively urgent level. Usually, it was a sign that the leader of the sect, Feng Yin Taoist master, was going to come forward and make a speech. This summoning bell was only effective for the disciples of Spirit Sword sect. Although Aya was a distinguished guest of the sect, she couldn't hear it. Seeing that Wang Lu's expression was strange, she asked, What's wrong? Wang Lu waved his hand. It's nothing. Someone just rang the bell of the sect leader. After thinking about it, he felt that he was somewhat unwilling to be interrupted by the bell. Therefore he clenched his teeth. I'm hungry. Let's go to the cafeteria to eat something and then go to the meeting. Aya's eyes lit up. Okay. Chapter 76. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Wang Lu set off from the Misty Peak. When he arrived at the 4 Divisions Peak, there was already a sea of people. Of course, such a description was not accurate. In the entire Spirit Sword sect, including all the inner and outer court disciples, as well as the elders who were cultivating in seclusion on the mountain, and even the handymen of the Carefree Peak, it was hard to say whether they could come up with 1,000 people. However, as the gathering place, the square of the 4 Divisions Peak was indeed a bit small. When hundreds of people gathered, it seemed to be very crowded. Of course, no matter how crowded it was, just by virtue of his red and white robe, he had a foothold in the square. Sure enough, when Wang Lu, while shouting sorry, forced his way through the crowd and came to the front of the square, there was already a row of seats neatly stacked there. Those were the seats for the true disciples of the Lingjian School. However, as usual, although there were 4 seats in that row, there was only one person sitting there. A young girl in a colorful dress was greeting him with a bright smile. She was the true disciple of the 4th elder, nicknamed Little Lu Li. Her real name was unknown. She entered the sect a few years earlier than him, but now her cultivation was close to the foundation building realm. It was not that she could not enter the foundation building realm, but the 4th elder Zhou deliberately suppressed her cultivation, wanting her to cultivate the brilliant sword heart before entering the foundation building realm. The so-called brilliant sword heart, although Wang Lu did not understand it, he felt that it was amazing. In short, this true disciple was different from him, who was slightly inferior. She was a real elite of the sect. Unfortunately, after entering the sect for more than 2 years, the two of them did not have much interaction. They only occasionally met at the gate and nodded to each other. In addition to Little Lu Li, there were 2 other true disciples in the sect. Unfortunately, after entering the sect for more than 2 years, he had not seen either of them. It was said that the oldest one was the disciple of the third elder Feng He. He traveled outside all year round and never wanted to return to the sect. The other one was the disciple of Feng Yin Taoist master, who entered the mountain almost at the same time as little Lu Li. However, she had been in closed-door training all year round, like a tuberculosis ghost who had never seen the light of day all year round. She had only occasionally heard from her junior brothers and sisters that her talent was so strong that it was hard to find anyone in the entire 9 regions who could match her, and her cultivation base was even higher than little Lu Li. Looking at the situation today, the other 2 successor disciples probably wouldn't be able to come. Wang Lu didn't care. He casually sat down in his seat, picked up the teacup on the small table and took a sip, waiting for the arrival of the sect leader. Just as he sat down, he heard an old voice coming from the front. "Very good. Everyone is here. Let's start the meeting." Looking up, the Heavenly Sword Hall elders were already sitting cross-legged in the air in front of the square. Wang Lu almost spat out the tea in his mouth. Damn it, the entire sect was waiting for me? Aren't you being too unprofessional as a sect leader? As a leader, you should always come later. At least wait for the rest of the soldiers to arrive before you come, right? If you come so early, how are we supposed to behave? Fortunately, except for Wang Lu, the others didn't care too much about this problem. After waiting for a while, Feng Yin Taoist master went straight to the point. Today, I have gathered everyone here because there is an important task to be arranged. It's about the cultivation of the disciples of the sect. Therefore, Elder Lu Xian will explain the specific situation to everyone. Then, sitting on the left side of Feng Yin, the elder of Lingjian School said, "Notice about the new disciples going out for experiential learning. In order to further strengthen the talent team building of Lingjian School and comprehensively improve the comprehensive strength of the disciples, the sect plans to carry out the work of experiential learning for the new disciples in the near future. The related plan has been studied and approved by the Heavenly Sword Hall elders. Now the notice is as follows." Hearing this opening, Wang Lu couldn't help but spit out the tea in his mouth. What's with this strange style of writing? It's like déjà vu? Seeing the strong doubt in Wang Lu's eyes, a foreign elder sitting in the air very considerately explained to Wang Lu through telepathy, "In recent years, this is the movement of writing in the vernacular within the Wanxian League. Don't you know? Speaking of which, you really haven't participated in this kind of plenary meeting before. In short, it's to get rid of those flashy writing styles and vigorously promote the vernacular. Especially regarding the ancient books of techniques, it's important to make the vernacular easy to understand and accurately describe the advantages, so that it's convenient for the cultivation of the new generation of cultivators and so on. As one of the top 5 in the Wanxian League, Lingjian School has to be a good example. Therefore, since a few years ago, this kind of official document has been written in the vernacular." Well, there was no need for Martial Uncle Guanhai to say anything more. Wang Lu had already deeply understood the profound connotation and importance of this movement. In short, the Wanxian League has been peaceful for thousands of years, and it's so uncomfortable that it has to be tossed around. Not long after, Elder Lu Xian finished reading the contents of the notice, and the disciples in the square had already been whispering to each other, showing their excitement. Even Wang Lu, who didn't care about the vernacular movement, fell into deep thought. The plan of the Heavenly Sword Hall elder to go out and gain experience, in simple terms, was to let the disciples below the foundation establishment stage go out and wander, using practical experience to enhance their experience and consolidate their cultivation. The scope of the experiential learning was within the Blue River Province. This was not unexpected. Because the Blue River Province was the tacit sphere of influence of Lingjian School, even though the sect had always been lax in management. Outside the Blue River Province, no matter where they went, they would enter the territory of other sections. Then, all kinds of troubles would arise, which would be intolerable. As for the content of the experiential learning, it was not something that could be casually played outside the mountain. The second elder Lu Xian clearly arranged a task. Each disciple must write a report of more than 5,000 words based on the experience of the experiential learning. The quality of the report would directly affect the sect's score. High quality didn't need to be mentioned, but if the quality was too poor, there was no upper limit to the deduction of points. As for the theme of the report, although the sect didn't strictly limit it, it gave a reference suggestion on the relationship between the immortal world and the mortal world. This topic was very big, but it was also very good. The 9 regions was vast and boundless, but in the end, in addition to the immortal cultivation world, There was only the mortal world, and the mortal world accounted for the majority of the 9 regions. The cultivators seemed to be aloof and above the mortal world, but if they really left the mortal world, the immortal cultivation world would be like a tree without roots. It was just that there were not many cultivators who could really understand the relationship between the two worlds. The reason why such a huge problem was given to a group of young boys and girls who had just entered the sect was that their cultivation time was still too short, their mortal heart was still unsettled, and their cultivation level was not high enough. If they wanted to be ethereal and transcend the mortal world, their ability was not enough. With such conditions, going down the mountain for experiential learning would be an exceptionally valuable experience. Therefore, the time of the experiential learning was set to be very long. 1 year. However, for Wang Lu, these problems were not the key. The key was that with this activity, he could finally go down the mountain legitimately, and could finally go home and have a look. In fact, when the Heavenly Policy Hall designed the plan, they deliberately included this point in the scope of consideration. Letting them go down the mountain to study the relationship between the immortal world and the mortal world was actually to let them take this opportunity to cut off their mortal ties. He had no other choice. Immortals and mortals walk different paths. This saying was not a joke. The main difference between cultivators and mortals was not their strength, but their lifespan. Even if they were only successful in the foundation establishment stage, the lifespan of a cultivator would be close to 200 years, a shoot-on-stage cultivator would have 300 years, and a Taoist Master King Pill would have 400 years of lifespan. These were just the bottom line. And the disciples cultivated by an ancient sect like the Lingjian school had a solid foundation, comprehensive quality, and their lifespan was several times longer than the average cultivator. Now, many of these disciples in the Qi refining stage had an innate lifespan of more than 150 years. In this case, there was an unavoidable problem. It was the parting of life and death with their relatives and friends in the mortal world. This experiential learning was actually a chance for the disciples to say goodbye to their relatives in the mortal world. Unfortunately, due to various conditions, it could only benefit the disciples born in the Blue River region. After the plan was announced, most of the disciples were talking about this matter. Well, this is the plan. You will leave at the beginning of next month. There is less than a month's time, so you should prepare well. Especially those who have entered the sect for the shortest time. You should speed up your cultivation. The world under the mountain is not as simple and comfortable as it is on the mountain. After explaining some simple matters to pay attention to, Feng Yin Taoist Master announced the end of the meeting. The clamor of the disciples suddenly swelled. Some were in high spirits, while some were in low spirits. Wang Lu did not have too much of a reaction. He just felt that it was not bad to have a chance to return home in glory. As for that report, when was a professional adventurer afraid of writing a report? Not to mention a year of experiential learning, even if he was asked to write now, he could easily make a report with rich content to fool people. Therefore, when he thought of the small mountain village in the northern corner of the Dog-Ear Mountain in the Marquis County of the Great Ming Country in the Eastern Road Prefecture of the Blue River region, Wang Lu's heart gradually became hot. He was too lazy to think about cutting off his worldly ties and so on. As long as he knew that he was going home soon, that was enough. After the meeting, Wang Lu returned to the non-phase Peak shack. His master was sitting in the hall, drinking alone. She was still drinking several hundred spirit stones worth of spirit wine, looking very carefree and happy. Normally, Wang Lu would have already ridiculed her. However, today, he was in a good mood, so he was too lazy to argue with her. Seeing Wang Lu enter the room, his master softly exclaimed, "Yo, not bad. You actually succeeded in your swordsmanship?" Wang Lu was taken aback. "You can see that?" "Humph, the swordsman's swordsmanship is different, so their temperament is also different. I can see the change in your temperament to know your cultivation." How could Wang Lu believe this kind of nonsense? He sneered. "Tell me the truth." Wang Wu confidently said, "Actually, when you and I were having a sword fight, I happened to pass by. *T. Then why are you bragging? Forget it. In short, I have overfulfilled your task. Now, can I go on a killing spree?" "Overfulfilled my ass, going on a killing spree? You've just completed the 3rd layer of non-phase sword art and you're already so cocky?" Wang Wu was simply resentful. "Didn't you hear what that idiot sect leader said? You little bastards are going to go down the mountain for experiential learning. Do you really think this is fun? Do you really think you can run amok in the 9 regions with your insignificant cultivation? Wang Lu immediately put on an ashamed and remorseful face. Master's lesson is really right. Your words are really enlightening. I really shouldn't be complacent because of a little bit of insignificant progress and forget that the immortal path is slow and endless. 9 regions is so big that there is always a sky beyond the sky. These heartfelt words made his master's hair stand on end, and the slightly tipsy feeling that she had just brewed disappeared without a trace. Naturally, the precious immortal wine that she drank to nourish her qi was tantamount to feeding a dog. What's wrong with you? Wang Lu's face changed again. Master, this disciple of yours is so weak. Shouldn't you give me some money to support me, ha ha ha? Where can I find money for you? Heavy metal is more like it. Wang Lu bluntly said, some time ago, you've taken all of that stupid donkey Jifeng's belongings. Don't tell me you've sold them all. Ridiculous. Wang Wu, of course, was not penniless. With her wealth, she could even afford to drink a few hundred spirit stones worth of wine. However, she still had a ridiculing expression on her face as she looked up at Wang Lu contemptuously. Wang Lu's face changed again. He threw himself to his knees and hugged his master's thigh. Local tyrant, let's be friends, okay? Let go. Chapter 77. The 5th elder of the Lingjian school hadn't had this kind of treatment for many years. She had always been the one hugging others and then being abandoned like a pair of worn-out shoes. In the past, she seized countless magical tools, magical treasures, elixirs from Taoist Master Jifeng. Indeed, she didn't sell them all. In fact, although Taoist Master Jifeng wasn't rich, a Yuanying stage cultivator's net worth in the 9 regions could not be underestimated. It was not that easy to cash them all in a short period of time. Secondly, very well, since you're so humble and even lost your dignity to beg me, I'll reluctantly support you. Who told you to have poor aptitude, slow perception, and ugly face? While ridiculing him, the 5th elder took out a small sword from her mustard seed bag and threw it to her disciple. What is this? Wang Lu asked while twirling the toothpick-like thin sword between his fingers. His master sneered. It's only been 2 months and you already forgot? After practicing with that barbarian female swordsman for a long time, your brain power really shriveled, little Wang Lu. Wang Lu attentively looked at it and felt that this small sword was a bit familiar. Before long he exclaimed, a small sword of Mount Kuen? Yes, it's the sword of Mount Kuen. Otherwise, is it really a toothpick? His master shook his head and explained seriously, this thing has no value to me, but it just so happens that you don't have a suitable weapon on hand, so you can make do with it. You should throw away that purple myrtle flexible sword. The weapons of the mortal world are already too far apart from your strength. However, this sword of Mount Kuen is an 8th rank spiritual treasure. Let alone riding the sword, you're just a qi refining stage cultivator. You're not even worthy to carry the sword spirit's shoes. And here, there's no sect leader's golden seal that can make you forcibly exert the power of the spiritual treasure. Therefore I helped you seal it. There are 9 layers of seals in total, which will naturally be unlocked as your cultivation base improves. With your current cultivation base, you can't even unlock the first layer of the seal. However, it doesn't matter if you can't unlock it. Spiritual treasure is, after all, spiritual treasure. Its material is far from that of ordinary magical tools. At least, with your level, you don't have to worry about breaking it. In addition, there's one important thing that you must pay attention to. With that, his master reached out to recall the sealed sword of Mount Kuen and gently flicked it with her finger, which emitted a crisp echo. The sword spirit of the sword of Mount Kuen is still here. Wang Lu frowned. This means? This means that before you officially become the owner of this sword, you must make a choice. Do you want to keep this sword spirit? What's the difference? His master smiled and said, of course there is. This sword of Mount Kuen wasn't refined by Taoist Master Jifeng himself, but by a master refiner of Shangjing sect 1200 years ago. Do you know what this means? Wang Lu thought for a moment. This sword is just a piece of trash with an outdated design concept? Baz! The needle-like sword trembled violently, as if expressing its strong indignation. His master reached out to suppress the vibration of the spiritual treasure, and then she was extremely surprised. I say, you, the top student of Spirit Sword Sect, haven't you ever taken a basic refining course? Wang Lu confidently said, the non-phase peak is so poor. Where would they get the money for me to learn refining? Well, to put it simply, there's an unwritten rule in the immortal cultivation world. The older the spiritual treasure, the higher its value. For example, the sword of Mount Kuen is 1,000 years old spiritual treasure. Although its basic level is only the 8th rank, its actual value is much higher than that. That idiot Jifeng's cultivation is insufficient, and his heart of Tao is shallow, so he could only barely display the 7th rank's power. In fact, it should be far more than that. Do you know why? Wang Lu, who has never taken a refining course, told the truth. I don't know. Oh, actually, the key is the sword spirit. The older the sword spirit, the richer its experience. And experience is, in many cases, a priceless treasure. A sword spirit that has experienced the vicissitudes of life can't be compared to a young and tender sword spirit. Well, to put it simply, Wang Lu said with a smile, I understand, it's like carrying an old grandpa with you. Yes, that's the reason. In addition to the various wonderful uses it can play in a fight. For example, a flying sword, this kind of thing that cultivators carry with them, because it has been accompanying the cultivator for a long time, it is not unfamiliar with many things in immortal cultivation. If you encounter a problem, you can ask it at any time, and you can use it as a half-teacher. Isn't it very convenient? After saying that, Wang Wu's tone changed. But then again, there are advantages and disadvantages. The more powerful the sword spirit, the more independent it is. Especially the sword of Mount Kuen, which has existed for thousands of years, a common king pill cultivator may not necessarily be able to suppress it. Not to mention you, a little qi cultivating stage cultivator. Although you have my 9 layers of seal, so in theory, there won't be too much danger, but what can a 1,200 years old sword spirit do? So I'll give you a chance to choose. Do you want to keep this sword spirit? If you don't, then I'll ask Senior Martial Brother to wash away the sword spirit's memory for the past 1,200 years, and obediently recognize you as its master. Although it will lack the various supernatural abilities of a 1,000-year-old sword spirit, at least it will be stable. If you keep it. Wang Lu didn't wait for her to finish. Of course I'll keep it. Is there a need to hesitate? Master smiled. You're quite decisive. Humph, even that idiot Jifeng didn't wash away his memory. Why should I bother to be that idiot who destroys his precious weapon? So what if it's been 1,200 years? It's just a mere sword spirit. If I say I can train it, can't I? Bas. The sword of Mount Kuen shook again, obviously extremely angry. Master thought for a moment. To be honest, just because of what you said just now, I think it's better to wash it away. In the end, Wang Lu didn't wash away the sword of Mount Kuen's autumn beam's consciousness. Regarding the matter of training the sword spirit, he showed extraordinary confidence. In his words, he was able to farm points in the Peach Blossom Village until the Great Array was shaken. A mere 8th grade sword spirit was nothing to him. However, the first meeting between Wang Lu and the sword spirit Autumn Beam was not pleasant. With the help of his master, Wang Lu extended the perception of his primordial spirit outside of his inner mansion, and touched the sword of Mount Kuen that was like an embroidery needle with 9 layers of seals. The interior of this 8th grade spirit treasure was really extraordinary. Clouds and mist covered most of the field of vision, but the part that could be seen was actually a mountain range. Surrounded by the mountains, a woman in apricot yellow clothes was quietly waiting for Wang Lu. The sword spirit Autumn Beam. This was the first time that Wang Lu communicated with the sword spirit using the inner vision technique. He saw that the woman in front of him seemed to be in her early 20s. Her appearance was elegant and refined, but her expression was as indifferent as ice. She stood motionless on a stone platform, as if she had merged with the stone platform, motionless for thousands of years. Ah, hello. The woman slightly closed her eyes and ignored him. Wang Lu was a little depressed. Sure enough, a 1,000-year-old tortoise has reached the end of its life. Miss, have you passed away? Then the woman opened her eyes. Although she did not speak, her eyes were filled with displeasure. Then, without waiting for Wang Lu to say anything, his master's primordial spirit quietly floated over and gave him a violent knock on the head. You idiot! You can actually make the generous earth element sword spirit so angry that it became as cold as ice. This is simply a skill. Seeing that Wang Wu also came in, Autumn Beam finally said, "You don't have to worry about anything. I have followed more than 10 masters in my life, and have never betrayed them." Wang Wu was silent for a moment. "Even if you follow such an unreliable master?" Autumn Beam said again, "Indeed, I have never seen such a master. But it is still a novel experience. I am looking forward to what kind of experience he will bring me." Although she said that, she still refused to look at Wang Lu. As she said, the sword of Mount Kuan had changed too many masters in the past 1,200 years. Among them, there were even evil devils. Autumn Beam's nature was indifferent. She showed the necessary loyalty to each master, but it did not mean that she did not have her own thoughts. A dignified 8th grade spirit treasure was given to a 7th grade Qi cultivating stage cultivator. No matter how generous Autumn Beam was, she still felt some anger in her heart. Not to mention that this new master seemed to have a bad temperament, and his mouth was extremely bad. It was really unpleasant. With the sword of Mount Kuan, Wang Lu had nothing else to ask for. Of course, it was also because he could not ask for it. His master, that poor bastard, was generous enough to give him the sword of Mount Kuan that was worth hundreds of thousands of spirit stones. Now it seemed that it was worth even more. Counting on her to continue to be generous. Haha. With the sword of Mount Kuan, for the next month, Wang Lu was busy. Busy practicing the sword. 8th grade spirit treasure, even with 9 layers of seal, for a 7th grade Qi cultivating stage cultivator, it was too heavy. Even if Wang Lu, under the guidance of his master, gave up almost all of his spell cultivation and focused on the way of the sword, hoping that in the future, he would be able to break 10,000 methods with one sword. However, now that he held the sword of Mount Kuan in his hand, he still felt that his head was heavy and his feet were light, and it was difficult to distinguish the priority. The 3rd layer of non-phase sword art, if placed in the mortal world, would already be considered an extraordinary and refined top sword art. However, Autumn Beam, this 1,000-years-old sword spirit, had a very keen vision. Wang Lu's swordsmanship was simply full of flaws, and she could not bear to look straight at it. Therefore, when Wang Lu moved his sword, Autumn Beam would often subconsciously correct his movements. This made Wang Lu very unhappy. "I practice my own sword art. What does it have to do with you? Your sword art is brilliant, but it's not on the same path as my non-phase sword art. A forceful girl is not sweet. Thank you. As a sword spirit, you should have the awareness of a sword spirit, and be a good audience." As a result, this reprimand made Autumn Beam tremble in anger. "Good, since you're so confident, then rely on your own strength to move the sword." Then, Wang Lu could no longer hear Autumn Beam's voice. Of course, this was not important to him, but the more troublesome problem was, when Autumn Beam disappeared, the sword of Mount Kuan suddenly felt as if it had 1,000 caddies of weight. Wang Lu cursed, and the sword of Mount Kuan fell straight down, almost dislocating his wrist. When he went back and asked his master, he found out that at the level of spiritual treasure, the communication between the cultivator and the sword spirit was extremely important. The most crucial point of the spiritual treasure's power was the synchronization rate between the cultivator and the sword spirit. Initially, Taoist Master Jifeng was kind to Autumn Beam, but limited by his perception, Tao heart, and other factors, the synchronization rate was at most 80%. Relying on other means, he was barely able to upgrade the sword of Mount Kuan to the 7th grade. But Wang Lu's situation was even worse. He was not on good terms with Autumn Beam, so the synchronization rate was basically negative. The fact that the sword of Mount Kuan did not devour its owner was because of Liang Qiu's kindness. To solve this problem, Wang Lu spent an entire month. He was too lazy to argue with Liang Qiu, and in this month, he only did one thing: train his sword. How to train? Of course it was to find someone to spar with. Who? Of course it was Aya. A few days ago, the chef of Misty Peak was provoked by the sword intent. Now his fighting spirit was strong, so these days, the food in the cafeteria had a bit more awe-inspiring sword intent. Damn it, the Western continent dog chef's look up at the starry sky didn't even pick out the fish bones. As a result, there were even fewer visitors from Misty Peak. Other than looking for Wang Lu to practice her swordplay, Aya really had nothing else to do. At first, Aya was taken aback. After not seeing him for a day or two, how could this genius youth swordsmanship have weakened so much? Sure enough, it's not good without my look up at the starry sky? Later, when she asked about the truth, She was full of praise for Wang Lu's choice. A swordsman should have the determination to forge ahead, and the temperament to cut through the thistles and thorns. Wang Lu's practice with a heavy sword seemed stupid, but it was like running with sandbags tied to his legs. The result of doubling the fatigue was that the effect of his practice would only be better. Thus, another month quickly passed by. In this month, Wang Lu cultivated the non-phase method and non-phase bone every day. Although his realm did not break through, it gradually stabilized, and his attribute bonus increased a bit. Then, most of his energy was used to practice his swordsmanship with Aya. Thus, his biggest progress was in his non-phase sword art. According to his master's division, there were still 3 layers, but the 3 layers were completely different. 1 month ago, his 3-layer non-phase sword art was just a mortal sword art. 1 month later, Wang Lu could not release his sword qi, nor could he create a curtain of light, but his swordsmanship had reached a higher level, and he had the qualification to advance to the immortal path. Because 1 month later, his 3-layer non-phase sword art had the assistance of the sword of Mount Kuen. In other words, Liang Qiu gave in. Although this Millennium Sword Spirit still did not like his new master, Wang Lu, after a month of careful observation, Liang Qiu had to admit that Wang Lu was really an excellent swordsman. His embryonic form of non-phase sword art was indeed full of flaws, but as a foundation and framework, it was good enough. Therefore, after some deliberation, Liang Qiu gradually cooperated with Wang Lu. Although the synchronization rate between the two was unbearably low, and although the spiritual treasure still had 9 layers of seal, that was only because his cultivation base was not high enough. However, from the actual combat effect, Wang Lu's 3-feet sword defense's defensive power had increased several times. With Aya's brilliant swordsmanship, under the premise of maintaining the same power output, it would take her at least 100 moves to break through the defense. Then, the experiential learning for the new disciples of Lingjian School officially began. Chapter 78. With the dull ringing of the bell on the stellar peak of the Spirit Sword Mountain, the Lingjian School's experiential learning for new disciples, which was held once every few decades, officially began. All the disciples below the foundation establishment stage were kicked down the mountain by the elders, regardless of the special reason, whether it was physical discomfort, or if they were in a critical period of closed-door training, they were treated equally. Furthermore, the elders had even sealed the bedrooms of their disciples, leaving no way out. Some of the disciples were jubilant, some were eager, and some were at a loss. But in short, in the coming year, they had to rely on themselves. Most of the people had already done their homework in the 1-month preparation period before the event. Although the Blue River region was only one of the 9 regions, and it was a relatively remote and impoverished region, compared to a group of small qi cultivating stage cultivators, it could still be said to be vast and boundless. There were hundreds of large and small mortal world countries. Among them, the larger one was the ancient Yong country, which had a population of nearly 100 million, accounting for 1/20th of the entire region. The smaller one was the White Moon country, which had a population of more than 1 million. As for the number of cultivators, it was about 1,000 to 1. Of course, most of them were non-organic cultivators. If the ratio of pure organic cultivators was 1 in 10,000, it would already be considered good. For these newcomers who had just entered the immortal path, the mortal world still had countless wonderful things, which would only dazzle their eyes when they went down the mountain. However, the Heavenly Policy Hall's senior brothers and elders of the Lingjian School actually provided a humane service. For each new disciple, they made an experiential learning instruction manual. Not only did it list some common knowledge that should be acquired during the experiential learning, it also drew up a map, listing out the recommended experiential learning locations, such as the White Moon country, where there was a recent conflict with the Shangjing sect, and the Desolate country, where there was a rumor that a magical treasure had recently appeared. These were all places where the wind and clouds met, but because the matter was not big, it was difficult to attract high-level cultivators, so it was suitable for the newcomers to do experiential learning. A year's time was not short, but when it came to experiential learning, including the round-trip time, it was only to go to 2 or 3 places and deal with 2 or 3 things. However, there were thousands of locations listed on the map, which was simply dazzling. Most of the disciples attached great importance to this map. In this month, they spent half of their time analyzing the map and choosing a location. Because after a year, apart from the progress of their cultivation, the results of the experiential learning would also be measured by that annoying experiential learning report. Moreover, the scores of the report would be scored by the people of the Heavenly Policy Hall. Who would dare to not attach importance to the instruction manual produced by the Heavenly Policy Hall? Wang Lu dared to. On the day he descended the mountain, Wang Lu threw the map aside and single-handedly went straight to the Wang family village in the Marquis County of the Great Ming Country's Eastern Road Prefecture. Of course, a remote and desolate village like the Wang family village would never be listed on the map. Thousands of suggested locations might seem like a lot, but when placed in the context of the entire Blue River region, it was just a drop in the ocean. A mere Wang family village was not qualified. Regarding this, Wang Lu could only say that the Heavenly Policy Hall's good-for-nothings had eyes but couldn't see. Wang family village was the former residence of the Void Spirit Root Wang Lu. In the future, he would have to pay a ticket to watch it. The richest man in the Wang family village, Old Master Wang, was worth millions. In the future, when the Wang family village's real estate value increased, he would change his name to Wang Million, or even Wang 100 million. He should be respected, okay? The Heavenly Policy Hall was blind. But he couldn't be blind. His time was only a short 1 year. He could do the experiential learning at any time. But the opportunity to go home was rare. As for the report, as long as he used his imagination, it would be enough. On the way home, Wang Lu's heart was filled with emotion. 2.5 years ago, a mountain village savage, with inexplicable confidence and several thousand taels of silver, bravely rushed into the Spirit Sword Mountain. 2.5 years later, a bright star in the immortal cultivation world slowly rose. How fast the change was! Although his current cultivation was still not high, and the immortal cultivation path had just begun, he had an 8th-rank spiritual treasure, not to mention the 9 layers of seal. He had a lot of challenge points in the Lingjian school. In terms of wealth, perhaps he was not inferior to the ordinary King Pill disciples in the Lingjian school. At the same time, as a successor disciple of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, his future had long been bright. This time, it could be said that he was returning home in glory. The only regret was, 2.5 years ago, there were 2 people who went to the Spirit Sword Mountain along this road, but when they went back, there was only Wang Lu. He didn't know what that kid Wang Zhong was thinking, but he would rather go with Xueqi and the others than go home with Wang Lu, as if he was a quarrelsome daughter-in-law. But this did save him a lot of trouble. Although in the past 2 years, he had continuously sent letters to his home, explaining the situation, it was obviously difficult for the diligent, low-key, and pragmatic Master Wang to accept his little errand boy to embark on the immortal cultivation path. After seeing each other, both of them would feel uncomfortable, so they might as well not see each other. Excluding this problem, Wang Lu was really looking forward to returning home in glory. After not seeing his parents for more than 2 years, even as a professional adventurer, he couldn't help but miss them. His heart was filled with eagerness. Unlike other immortal cultivators, Wang Lu simply didn't think about the difference between the immortal cultivation path and the immortal cultivation path, or the separation of life and death. His parents were his parents. Why would he need to consider whether they were mortal or cultivators? Even if his parents were brought to him by that magical comet, and they were more like adoptive parents, how could the grace of more than 10 years of upbringing be false? Master Wang and his wife, Xueqi, were the kind of simple and honest people who had no lack of wisdom in life. For more than 10 years, in addition to the grace of upbringing, they also got along very well. When he was a child, his father racked his brains to calculate for a few hundred taels of silver, and his mother spent the whole night in the kitchen, making New Year's goods for the tenant farmers. Although it was just a trivial detail in life, it still gave him a special feeling. As for the difference between the immortal cultivation path and the immortal cultivation path, right now, he was only 15 years old. Although his parents were mortals, they were healthy and had at least 30 years of lifespan. Not to mention that it was not difficult to take some elixirs from the Spirit Sword Mountain to extend the lifespan of mortals by 100 or 200 years. It was just that a long lifespan might not be good for mortals. In short, there was no need to worry about things that would happen decades later. In addition, although the Wang family village was just a remote mountain village, it was, after all, his hometown where he lived for more than 10 years. There were hundreds of families in the village, and Wang Lu knew each and every one of them by name. For example, the neighbor Wang Dafu, who regarded his father as his enemy and wanted to surpass him in terms of wealth but was always unable to do so. Another example was the ancestral traditional Chinese medicine doctor, Dr. Wang, who specialized in treating all kinds of difficult and complicated diseases. Among the hundreds of millions of people in the 9 regions, they were just ordinary people. However, in Wang Lu's more than 10 years of life, each of them played an important role. The first 12 years of his life were simple and honest, so as a professional adventurer, he ought to be bored. In fact, when Wang Lu left his hometown for the Spirit Sword Mountain 2.5 years ago, he did have the pleasure of getting rid of the cage. However, after experiencing 2 years of life as a cultivator, he inevitably missed the easy and simple Wang family village. After getting used to playing with a mature woman, it was inevitable for him to yearn for a lowly. While he was indulging in flights of fancy, Wang Lu's pace was astonishingly fast. When he came to the Spirit Sword Mountain, he first crossed the mountains from the Wang family village to the Marquis County on foot for 2 days. Then he rode the county's carriage, which took him 10 days to arrive at the foot of the Spirit Sword Mountain. Fortunately, the Great Ming country was not far from the Spirit Sword Mountain. On this trip back to his hometown, Wang Lu traveled day and night on foot. In less than 3 days, he saw the familiar outline of the Dog Ear Mountain. This was the advantage of being a cultivator. Even if he was just a level 7 Qi cultivating stage cultivator in the Lingjian school and was not good at footwork, but in the mortal world, he was still a top martial arts master, and his speed was faster than a galloping horse. However, when he arrived at the foot of the Dog Ear Mountain, Wang Lu could not help but stop. What should he do next? This was the first time they met after 2.5 years. How should he appear in front of the villagers? High and aloof, with the posture of an immortal cultivator, like an emperor on an inspection tour? Or should he be approachable and cordially greet every villager along the way? This was not a matter of vanity, but it involved a lot of practical factors. As a cultivator with a high EQ, Wang Lu had to plan ahead. However, before he could think of an answer, the scene in front of him made him deeply frown. The change in the surrounding spiritual energy was somewhat abnormal. With the void spirit root, Wang Lu's sensitivity to the surrounding spiritual energy was far beyond that of an ordinary cultivator. Therefore, during his 2 years of cultivation in the sect, he learned a skill called Qi observation technique in his spare time. There were many factors that affected the change in the surrounding spiritual energy. Among them, the behavior of living creatures accounted for the majority, especially human beings. In places with people, the change in the surrounding spiritual energy was far more intense and complicated than in the uninhabited area. A very important part of the so-called Qi observation technique was to explain how to deduce what happened in the place through the change in the surrounding spiritual energy. More than 2 years ago, the Wang family village was like most of the remote mountain villages in the 9 regions. The surrounding spiritual energy was active but not intense, just like a pretty daughter of a humble family. To describe its color, it was about light green. However, what was reflected in his eyes now was a withered yellow color. For a more detailed analysis, Wang Lu couldn't see it due to his limited cultivation level. However, based on this withered yellow color, he could make a preliminary judgment. There were many possibilities. One was that there was a drought year after year, which caused the vitality to wither. However, looking at the scene of the Dog Ear Mountain, it didn't seem like it. Another possibility was that an important person in the village passed away. However, based on the situation of the Wang family village, even the death of the village head or the richest man, Master Wang, would not cause such a drastic change in the aura of the mountain. In the Wang family village, except for the 2 outliers, Wang Lu and Wang Zhong, the rest were just ordinary people. The structure of the village was simple and stable, so it didn't matter who was missing. The last possibility was that the evil people wreaked havoc and overflowed with evil energy. Thinking of this, Wang Lu didn't care about any practical problems. He quickened his pace and rushed straight into the mountain. After crossing the highest peak of the Dog Ear Mountain, Wang Lu finally saw the Wang family village again. The village didn't seem to have changed much compared to 2.5 years ago. With his amazing eyesight now, Wang Lu could clearly see the diligent and happy smiles of the farmers who were busy in the fields. He could also see the angry but doting women who were scolding naughty children. However, the withered yellow aura filled with it made it difficult for him to get over it. After looking for a while at the top of the mountain, Wang Lu still couldn't figure out the main points. After thinking for a while, Wang Lu decided to directly ask his father. It wasn't a dragon's pool or a tiger's den. As a dignified cultivator, why should he be afraid of the slightest thing? Therefore, He didn't care about putting on airs. With the dust of running day and night, Wang Lu walked into the Wang family village and went straight to the spacious house in the east of the village, which was also his home. However, the strange thing was that the villagers he met along the way all looked at him with strange eyes, as if they were looking at a rare beast that was on the verge of extinction. There was a trace of pity in their curiosity. Even when they greeted him, they seemed hesitant. Wang Lu greeted him several times with enthusiasm, but all he got was an awkward and even cold response. Damn it, what the hell is going on? Wang Lu's brows wrinkled more and more tightly. His intuition told him that the change in the village was more troublesome than he imagined. Although he didn't know why he didn't receive a reply, at least the villagers should know his identity as an immortal cultivator. In the past, that idiot Wang Xiaohu cheated his father of hundreds of thousands of silver taels and sent it to a ninth-rate organization called the Seven-Star Sect, which made the villagers endlessly envious. As a successor disciple of one of the 5 uniques, he was like a star that descended from the heavens, so why would they sympathize with him? As for that faint hostility, it was even more inexplicable. Hostile to a powerful cultivator who could flatten the entire mountain village in half a day? Did he have maggots in his head? While he was thinking, he suddenly heard someone calling him from the side. Isn't this Wang Fugui's child? Wang Fugui was the name of Wang Lu's father. However, since he became the richest man in the village and had a relationship with the county government officials, he was respectfully addressed as Master Wang. Very few people mentioned his real name. Even the second richest neighbor, Wang Dafu, had to respectfully address him as Big Brother Wang. And there was only one person in the village who would directly address him by his full name. The old village head of the Wang family village, Wang Qinian. Wang Lu turned his head and sure enough, it was the white-bearded kind-looking old man. In the youth's impression, this old village head was an out-and-out good person, with a generous character and no lack of wisdom. He was an elder worthy of respect. When Wang Lu came down from the Spirit Sword Mountain, he specially brought him a souvenir. "Ai, come with me." The old man sighed and beckoned to Wang Lu. With a belly full of doubts, Wang Lu followed him. Before long, they arrived at the village head's house. "Come in and sit down." After sitting down in the room, without waiting for Wang Lu to open his mouth, the village head lovingly patted Wang Lu's head. "I haven't seen you for more than 2 years, you've grown up." Listening to this well-intentioned sigh, Wang Lu smiled and said, "Puberty. It's been hard on you for more than 2 years, right?" "It's okay, it's not that hard." That's good, that's good." Wang Qinian happily nodded, and then immediately sighed. In the past few years, a lot of things have happened in the village. Realizing that the topic might be getting to the point, Wang Lu leaned forward a bit and looked serious. "I can see that there are evildoers running amok in this place." In Wang Lu's view, although this sentence was a bit radical as a pathfinder, with his relationship with the old village head, it was nothing. Didn't the village head invite him to his house to discuss the change in the village? And as a dignified immortal cultivator, if he beat around the bush, it would lower his own status, so he might as well get straight to the point. However, this sentence made Wang Qinian's face change greatly. How dare you say that? If the immortals hear it, what should we do?" Wang Lu was shocked on the spot. Where did the immortals come from? Not to mention more than 6,000 years ago, after the Age of Chaos, there has never been a real ascendant. Even in the dream time, the existence of the immortal world is just a legend. Wang Qinian shook his head. "I don't know what Age of Chaos you're talking about, but, alas, that child Xiaohu is right. In the past 2 years, you've been deceived too deeply." "The hell? What kind of godly development is this? Who is Wang Xiaohu? How could he be deceived? Could it be that in the Spirit Sword Mountain, I've been deceived by a humanoid walking chastity called Wang Wu? The question is, how did the old village head know about the matter in the Spirit Sword Mountain? I've never said anything bad about my master in the letters I sent home. I've never talked behind her back. I've always scolded her face." Chapter 79. The village head's words caused Wang Lu, this professional adventurer, to fall into a considerable confusion. He felt that everything that happened in the village was particularly strange. "Grandpa village head, what's wrong?" Hearing the 4 words village head grandpa, the color of regret in Wang Qinian's eyes became a bit thicker. Looking at Wang Lu's dusty face, Wang Qinian lamented, "Child, all these years. You've gone astray." Although he knew that what he said was definitely not the same thing, Wang Lu still felt distressed. "Damn it, who said it wasn't? But fortunately your luck is good." Wang Qinian's expression seemed like he could still be saved. "The Taoist immortals of the 7-star sect will soon come to the village to enlighten the predestined person. I think we should be able to ask them to help you. Although your relationship with Xiaohu is not very good, he is a person who remembers old friendship, so he should be willing to come forward to help." When these words came out, in Wang Lu's mind, tens of thousands of alpacas spread their wings like doves of peace, and their droppings fell like rain. The youth felt that these droppings were as dense as a lotus seed, enough to drive him crazy. But 7-star sect? That group of wild chickens, and Wang Xiaohu? Wang Lu calmed himself down and suddenly remembered the duel that took place on the cloud platform of the Spirit Sword Mountain a few months ago, as well as the fuse that led to the duel. "I think I probably understand what happened in the village." Wang Lu sneered and inwardly said, "It's really the same as what the textbook says. Looking at the aura, if the color is yellow, then this place might be haunted by a demon, not a big disaster, but a group of demons and monsters. I was worried that there might be some hidden devil, but it turns out they're just a group of fake medicine scammers." He didn't say these words to the old village head. Although the old man had white hair and a youthful face, he was actually over 70 years old. If he said these words that were enough to shock his worldview, if he got a cerebral hemorrhage, then that would be a sin. "Grandpa village head, how long have these Taoist immortals of the 7-star sect been in the village?" Seeing the dignified expression on Wang Lu's face as he began to inquire about the 7-star sect, Wang Qinian thought that the youth had the tendency to turn over a new leaf, which greatly relieved him. Because according to the 7-star sect's Taoist immortals, some of the youths who were cheated by the swindlers would become particularly stubborn and difficult to be enlightened. Even if they were killed, it would still be difficult to make them admit that they were cheated. And Wang Lu, who left the village 2 years ago and went to a secluded sect to be his master, was likely to become such a victim. However, in the end, he was still the clever and likable child in the village, and he quickly came to his senses. The Taoist immortals came to the village more than 2 years ago. Speaking of which, it is also thanks to the child Xiaohu's good fortune. If it weren't for his extraordinary talent and being chosen by the Taoist immortals, it would be difficult for our Wang family village to have such good fortune. Over the years, many people have been enlightened by the Taoist immortals. Even in the entire Great Ming Kingdom, there are few villages as lucky as ours. Wang Qinian was about to go on and on about the 7-star sect's great achievements when Wang Lu interrupted him. "Who were the people that they enlightened?" Wang Qinian said. "Needless to say, Wang Dafu's family. In addition, Wang Taizhu, Wang Laozhen, Wang Shanyao. There are about 7 or 8 people." Wang Lu sneered, thinking, "What a coincidence, the richest people in the village are all on the list. The only exception is Wang Shanyao, but he has a beautiful daughter, who happened to be the goddess that Wang Xiaohu has been longing for many years. Tsk, this is too unscrupulous. Fortunately, this is the Wang family village, this kind of remote and inexperienced village. If this was another place, it would have been seen through long ago. Then what about my father? As the richest man in the village, he was of course the best development target, right? It would have been better if he didn't mention it, but once he did, Wang Qinian began to sigh again. Little Lu, your father, is indeed a fated person in the eyes of the Taoist immortals, but who told the road to happiness to be strewn with setbacks? Wang Lu asked. Is it because of Wang Xiaohu's interference? As a result, Wang Qinian became angry. You, this child, why didn't you learn anything good in these 2 years? Instead, you learned a bad heart from the outside. Although Wang Xiaohu had a conflict with you in the past, in this past year, he never said anything bad about you in front of the Taoist immortals. On the contrary, when the Taoist immortals learned that you left the village 2 years ago to worship another Taoist immortal, they originally intended to give up on your father, and even wavered their intention to enlighten the village. It was only because of Wang Xiaohu's persuasion that there was a turning point. Oh, so that's how it is. A smile appeared on Wang Lu's face. No wonder along the way, the villagers looked at him with strange eyes. It turned out that they regarded him as the culprit who was deceived by a cult, implicated his family, and possibly even implicated the village. Therefore, on the one hand, they were somewhat disgusted, but on the other hand, they regarded him as a victim and sympathized with him. He really had to thank Wang Xiaohu for his good words. Ha ha ha. Then I really have to thank brother Xiaohu. AI, it's good that you know. Originally, your father and the Seven Stars sect didn't have any affinity with the immortals. It was Xiaohu's repeated persuasion that the Taoist immortals listed him as an activist. It was also Xiaohu's idea to let him come forward to build a courtyard for the Taoist immortals. After the completion, they could upgrade it to a development target. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but ask, courtyard? It's a place for the Taoist immortals and other disciples to stay. Although there are a lot of empty houses in our village, how could those dilapidated houses entertain the Taoist immortals? So, village head grandpa, just tell me how much did you spend? Only your father knows the specific number, but it's at least 300,000 to 500,000 taels. Wang Lu almost jumped up. 300,000 to 500,000? Are you trying to build a city? This is, after all, a courtyard for the Taoist immortals. How could it be measured by our mortal standard? The materials must be carefully selected. Wang Lu sneered. Yes, our villagers' eyesight is not good enough, so the Seven Star sect must send someone to select the materials for the construction. My father only needs to pay for it. Wang Qinian froze for a moment. Yes, how do you know? Wang Lu laughed again. If it's me, I would also do it this way. Moreover, they are Taoist immortals, so they certainly won't care about the mortal world's gold and silver. Therefore, they probably don't even have an account book, right? Wang Qinian always felt that there was something wrong with this statement, but the fact was unmistakable. Taoist immortals would not covet the mortal world's wealth. Hee. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu felt that it was enough. Village head grandpa, it's impossible for the Seven Star sect's Taoist immortals to always stay in the village, but there should be other disciples in the village, right? Wang Qinian was stunned. There is indeed. There is a Seven Star sect's publicity envoy, who is a senior disciple of the sect. His status is several levels higher than Xiaohu's. Is Xiaohu also there? Yes, he is now the publicity envoy's assistant. Okay, I understand. With that, Wang Lu no longer exchanged pleasantries with village head grandpa, got up, and left. After that, Wang Lu was not in a hurry to go home. Instead, he stood outside the village head's house, using his eyesight to observe the surrounding spiritual energy, trying to find the source of the yellow stain. With his qi cultivating stage cultivation base, it was impossible for him to do so. However, with the best quality void spirit root, before long, Wang Lu saw a trace of yellow stain rising from the east side of the village, which disturbed the entire spiritual energy movement in the village. This was the old residence of his father, Master Wang, who was building a new house to get rich. Although the area was not big, in the mountain village, it was rare for it to be clean and tidy. No wonder people took a fancy to it. Interesting, it actually delivered itself to the door. When Wang Lu murderously rushed to the crime scene, he was surprised to find that the source of the evil was preaching inside the house, and there were many innocent onlookers outside, so that his original plan could not be carried out smoothly. According to Wang Lu's idea, to deal with this kind of swindler, picking up a weapon and beating them up was more effective than anything else. If they were not convinced, then he could just kill them with a sword, and the others would naturally be convinced. As long as the source of the evil was removed, everything else would be handled with half the effort. However, he did not expect that the publicity ambassador would come to the village, and was unwilling to be left out, diligently doing his business. Now there were dozens of people outside the courtyard, listening with great interest. How could he enter and kill them? While he was hesitating, he heard the publicity ambassador speak in a clear voice. The path to immortality is not far away, it is right beside us. As long as we seize the opportunity, everyone can become immortals. Many sects like to portray immortal cultivation as aloof and unreachable, but that is because their concept of immortal cultivation is outdated. At the same time, they are also worried that our awakening will shake their ruling position. Imagine if everyone becomes a cultivator, an immortal. How can those immortal sects have the qualifications to order us around and be aloof? Therefore, please put down the prejudice in your heart, summon your courage, face the path to immortality, and say to yourself, I can do it. Moreover, even if you feel that you are too old and do not want to embark on the path to immortality, you still have to think about your children, right? At this time, the villagers were deeply attracted by his words, and made a thoughtful expression. A few women were even discussing, that's right, I feel that our family's dog has natural spiritual roots. He is the material for immortal cultivation. A few years ago, there was a passing Taoist priest who said he didn't have it. I think it was that Taoist priest with bad intentions. Even Dr. Wang, a rare cultured person in the village, echoed, isn't that so? At that time, everyone saw his immortal-like appearance and thought he was some capable person, so they treated him very warmly. But when we asked him to do something, he refused in every way possible. He really doesn't look like he has real skills. Wang Lu's expression became more and more serious as he listened from outside. The conversation of the villagers was really stupid. If it was the Li family village or the Zhang family village, Wang Lu would at most scold them for being retarded in his heart. However, growing up in the Wang family village, Wang Lu was very clear that this simple and honest village should not have such hostile villagers. There was no doubt that the withered yellow color was not only a change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but it had also been projected onto people's hearts. There was no such thing as a simple and honest people in the world. In Wang Lu's view, perhaps after a few decades or 100 years, when he became famous and the Wang family village became the former residence of an immortal cultivator, this small and fresh social atmosphere would naturally not be able to be maintained. However, both were women. Spending a night with a prince on a white horse or being raped by a giant mountain ape were two completely different concepts, okay? At this time someone in the house asked, then may I ask Mr. Zhou, how should we grasp this immortal fate? As soon as this person's voice sounded, Wang Lu could not stand still. Because the person who spoke was his father, the richest man in the Wang family village, Master Wang Fuguei. And the following conversation was even more maddening. To be specific, it depends on whether your heart is sincere or not. Didn't I say it before? First, build a courtyard for the several Taoist immortals of the Seven-Star sect, and then we can talk about the rest. Old Master Wang said hesitantly, but it's just a courtyard, yet it actually cost 1 million. This is also... Oh, Master Wang is reluctant to part with the money? Master Wang suddenly broke into a cold sweat. It's not that I'm reluctant, it's just that. I think, I'm a person with shallow fortune. In this life, I'm already satisfied with just a little bit of wealth, so I'd rather forget about the immortal path. Seeing the richest man flinched, that public publicity envoy chuckled. Master Wang, actually, this matter is not just about your opportunity, but the entire village's immortal fate. If you build this courtyard for the Taoist immortals, in the future, when the Taoist immortals come, everyone will benefit from it. Could it be that Master Wang has the heart to ruin the entire village's immortal fate? How could old Master Wang bear the weight of this accusation? He immediately trembled. If that's the case, then that 1 million. Seeing that he was about to clench his teeth and agree, a righteous voice suddenly sounded from outside the door. All of you stop. Chapter 80. All of you stop. While they were talking, a young man in red and white entered the room like a gust of wind. His face was covered in dust, but there was a hint of a sneer on his face. Interesting. The swindlers of an evil sect actually dared to mess with me. This Blue River province really needs to be regulated. The publicity ambassador was taken aback. May I know who you are? Thank you for asking. I'm your father. Wang Lu resisted the urge to raise his sword and slash him. He answered with a fake smile. In front of his fellow villagers, he still hoped to solve the problem in a peaceful way, but it was really difficult to vent his anger, so his gaze was as horrifying as it could be. However, this Mr. Zhou, who was sent by the Seven-Star sect to preach, was not an easy person to deal with. Although he was stared at by Wang Lu until his legs went soft and his bladder went numb, his face remained calm. Ignoring his rudeness, he turned around and began to mobilize the crowd. Everyone, does anyone know whose child this is? The villagers didn't react at first, but after a while, some of them vaguely recognized it. This child. Could he be little Lu? Hearing this, old Master Wang's body trembled. He stood up in disbelief. Little Lu? It's you? Being called by his father, Wang Lu couldn't pretend that he didn't hear it. He waved his hand and said, "Father, please sit down and don't make a sound. After I've dealt with this swindler, we can talk about our father-son relationship." At this time, Mr. Zhou came back to his senses. "Wang Lu? You're the Wang Lu who went out to seek immortality 2 years ago?" Wang Lu sneered. "That's right. What can I do for you?" "I don't dare to give advice, it's just," Mr. Zhou said and then leisurely smiled. "It seems like you have some prejudice against our 7-star sect?" "Prejudice? What a joke. Would you be prejudiced against a pile of dog poop?" Mr. Zhou's expression suddenly changed. "Kid, do you know that a loose tongue can cause trouble? If you insult the 7-star sect, be careful that the Taoist immortals of the 7-star sect will send disaster to you." While speaking, his eyes swept around. "It's more likely to implicate other people." This was another trick to mobilize the masses. When the villagers of Wang family village heard this, they immediately became noisy. "Little Lu, what are you doing? Hurry up and apologize to Mr. Zhou." You, shut up and apologize to of Zhou." Hearing the quarrel behind him, Wang Lu's face turned black. "All of you shut up." The sound of his voice was like muffled thunder, and the dust on the roof of the roof. The surrounding villagers were immediately shocked. Although he was just a level 7 Qi cultivating stage newcomer, in the mortal world, Wang Lu had long been a transcendent figure. In the army, he was a peerless general who could fight against 1,000 men. In the martial arts world, he was a super great grandmaster. With just a lift of his hand, he could easily deter a group of mortals. Wang Lu thought for a moment. Although giving the name of his sect to this lowly swindler seemed to damage his sect's reputation, if he could make this 7-star sect retreat, it would save him a lot of trouble. Lingjian School. Mr. Zhou frowned. Lingjian School. After a moment, he nodded. "Turns out you're the disciple of Lingjian School. No wonder you have such skill. However, even if it's Lingjian School, it still needs to be reasonable. For no reason, you humiliated my 7-star sect, and then used overbearing means to intimidate the innocent villagers. This is somewhat unreasonable." Wang Lu was shocked. "What the hell, are you crazy? After hearing the name of Lingjian School, you actually didn't obediently kneel down and lick my name, but instead, you want to argue with me, a successor disciple. You really have the guts." In the past, when this old man brought that dead fatty to the small clear sky peak, I was not as bold as you. Admittedly, in theory, no matter how big one's background was, there should be a reason, but in the 9 regions, how could there be so many reasons? The bigger the fist was the hard truth. And no matter how much the Lingjian School declined, it was, after all, one of the 5 unique immortal cultivation sects. Not to mention the 10 elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall. Even if a senior disciple came, he could easily trample over 100 of these 7-star sect. Arguing with the Lingjian School? Do you think you're worthy? However, in the face of Mr. Zhou's spirit of seeking death, Wang Lu's interest was piqued. "Oh, you want to reason with me?" Being stared at by this young man, Mr. Zhou felt uncomfortable all over, but he still maintained his imposing manner. "Yes, I want to reason with you. Just now, you insulted my 7-star sect, so there must be a reason." Wang Lu smiled. "Reason? Does the Lingjian School need a reason to trample on people? Forget it. I'll be a bit more honest. Is deceiving the common people enough?" "Oh, how can I deceive the common people?" Mr. Zhou laughed out loud and then began to mobilize the crowd. "Everyone, do you feel that I've deceived you?" One after another, the ignorant villagers echoed. "There's no such thing, Mr. Zhou." That's right. Listening to you talk about the difference between immortal and mortal, we, the country folks, are suddenly enlightened. Mr. Zhou, you said that our family's dog also has the immortal cultivation spirit root. I absolutely believe you. Little Lu, don't make trouble. Wang Lu frowned, and then his voice shook the surrounding area. "All of you shut up. Surnamed Zhou, don't use the ignorant people as a shield to fish in troubled waters, or else I'll directly kill you." This was not a bluff. That naked murderous intent caused Mr. Zhou's heart to palpitate. "Very well, then please tell us, how exactly did our 7-star sect deceive the common people? Based on your words that everyone can become an immortal, I know that your 7-star sect is just a lowly swindler. If everyone can become an immortal, Why don't we see immortals springing up like bamboo shoots after the rain? Who knew that Mr. Zhou would laugh? But his attitude was as if he had finally fallen into his rhythm. Good question. This question has actually been bothering the immortal cultivation world for tens of thousands of years. In the past, people thought that the immortal fate was predestined, and only a few lucky people with natural spirit root could embark on the immortal path. But actually that's not true. The heaven is fair, giving everyone the same opportunity. It's just that, we haven't discovered it until our 7-star sect's patriarch, Taoist Master Shen He, created the 7 stars pill, which opened the door to the immortal path for all living beings. Wang Lu suddenly laughed. That's simply slapping your own face. When your 7-star sect sold 6 harmonies pill and spirit root development pill at a high price in the past, why didn't you mention the 7 stars pill? Not to mention the one who made mortals cultivate to immortal cultivation world is Patriarch Lu He of the Shengjing sect. What does it have to do with your patriarch, Taoist Master Shen He? You dare to use Shengjing sect's tiger skin? However, Mr. Zhou's response was simply jaw-dropping. Hee, that's just the common people's opinion. Actually, Patriarch Lu He is our Taoist Master Shen He's junior brother. Most of his skills were learned from Taoist Master Shen He. That 6 harmonies pill and 6 harmonies pill are actually just simplified versions of the 7 stars pill. Although the cost is lower, the effect is not as good. Although taking the 6 harmonies pill can also set foot on the immortal path and prolong one's lifespan, compared to the 7 stars pill, which can make people immortal, it's far from it. However, the 7 stars pill is the sect's treasure. How could we casually sell it to outsiders? If not for your Wang family village having a big opportunity, you wouldn't even have the qualification to know the existence of the 7 stars pill. Therefore, in the past few years, the 7-star sect only sold 6 harmonies pill to you. Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh. This Mr. Zhou was really capable. He was indeed worthy to be the publicity ambassador of this deceiving sect. He could even come up with such a nonsensical reason. What's more, in the face of this explanation, which was too much to complain about, even Wang Lu felt like a rabbit pulling a turtle. Because there was a very important issue here. The debate with this Mr. Zhou was not to refute the opposite party, but to win over the audience. The 7-star sect has been developing their influence in the Wang family village for a long time, and the entire spiritual energy in the village has been tarnished by them, which was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. To correct this influence, the best way was to tear off the deceiver's mask in front of everyone's eyes, exposing their true colors. Of course, there was also a simpler way. If Wang Lu had the cultivation level of foundation establishment. No, as long as he was a high-level qi cultivating stage, he could learn 1 or 2 exquisite spells from the sect, which would be enough to fool this group of inexperienced barbarians. Unfortunately, what he learned was the one sword to break 10,000 methods, and the way of the sword was specialized in defense. Although the actual combat effect was amazing, and according to his master's evaluation, its hardness was enough to make a low-level foundation establishment stage cultivator feel embarrassed. However, it was useless in this situation. Relying on the debating method to expose the scam, there was a difficulty, and that was, the audience was subjectively inclined to the opponent, and their brains were hopelessly stupid. And Mr. Zhou was undoubtedly an expert in brainwashing idiots. Just now, there was not a single word of truth in that explanation, which any regular immortal cultivator could directly refute. However, Wang Lu knew that even if he caught any point, it would be meaningless. Because the audience simply didn't know the truth. If Mr. Zhou said that Taoist Master Shen He was the martial brother of Patriarch 6 Harmonies, they would certainly believe it without hesitation. However, if Wang Lu said that Taoist Master Shen He was just a lousy birdman, this group of villagers would be furious. Debating in such an environment was overwhelmingly disadvantageous to him. However, it was also because of this that it was more interesting. Because, although the situation seemed to be disadvantageous to him, the real fatal flaw was the opposite party. As everyone knew, in a qualified debate, there should be no difference in the quality of the two sides' arguments. Otherwise, if one side argued that the sun rose from the east and the other side argued that it rose from the west, then there would be no fun. And now, the 7-star sect undoubtedly wanted to say that the crow was white and the sun was rising from the west. Even if the audience was inclined, there was a fatal flaw in their argument. Then, as long as he found out these fatal flaws, the real face of the swindler would inevitably be exposed. And the flaw was, in fact, obvious. Why do we have to charge? Mr. Zhou was stunned. What? Since your 7-star sect's purpose is to deliver all living beings from suffering, to make everyone become immortals, why do you covet the mortal world's gold and silver? 1,000,000 taels of silver is a painful number for my father, but it's nothing to an immortal cultivator, right? Mr. Zhou said with a smile. It's not that I covet money, I just need you to show your sincerity. This issue could be said to be a cliché for the 7-star sect's publicity ambassador, and it was also a topic that could not be avoided in the development of the 7-star sect's business. Regarding this, Mr. Zhou had already expected it and had long studied it. Usually, people would repeatedly emphasize how passionate their sincerity was, and they didn't need money to prove it. However, for mortals, there was nothing more effective than money to prove their sincerity. Anyone could swear, but not everyone could do it with real money. The topic of sincerity could be said to be his home ground. However, the next moment, Mr. Zhou found out that the youth in front of him directly flipped the table. Sincerity? What's that? Didn't you say that because the people in the Wang family village have a great opportunity, they were favored by the sect's immortals? Since the villagers already have that opportunity, what's the use of sincerity? Mr. Zhou was suddenly at a loss for words. After a moment he said, opportunity and sincerity, of course, both are indispensable. Otherwise, do you want our 7-star sect's people to beg you to become immortals? Wang Lu immediately laughed. Of course. Isn't it the same in the immortal cultivation world? Disciples with good aptitude and affinity to immortality are treasures wherever they go. Each sect's reward giver elders spend a lot of effort every year to find talented people with affinity to immortality. Even if the other party is unwilling, they would still be forcefully dragged back to the sect. Is your 7-star sect special? Without waiting for Mr. Zhou to refute, Wang Lu further said, sincerity is mutual. The Wang family village has the sincerity to seek immortality, but your 7-star sect's sincerity to enlighten the world? Just a few bowls of talisman water and a few packets of 6 harmonies powder is sincerity? 1,000,000 silver coins is an astronomical number for anyone in the village, but a few packets of 6 harmonies powder is not even a drop in the bucket for you. Is this fair? This. Mr. Zhou was dumbfounded. It wasn't that Wang Lu's words were impeccable, but rather, he had never encountered such a problem before. How could Wang Lu give him this opportunity? Secondly, if the 7-star sect really wants to enlighten the world, why do we need to talk about sincerity? If everyone is fated, then let it be. If everyone is fated, then let it be. Sincerity? How much is it worth? People's hearts are fickle. Today you have sincerity, but tomorrow you might regret it. What's the use of this kind of sincerity? If your ideal of everyone becoming an immortal is true, then you should unconditionally distribute your 7 stars powder to the world's fated people. There's no need for sincerity. With that, Wang Lu put on a victorious posture, waiting for the other side to struggle. Sincerity seemed to be the home field of the 7-star sect swindlers, but in fact, it was their fatal weakness. The swindlers might have an extravagant theoretical basis, but they would never have sincerity. Grasping this point, they would be successful in every endeavor. Moreover, the more wonderful thing was, the villagers' mentality was no longer as simple and honest as before. Gradually, they began to realize their selfishness, greed, and other negative emotions. And he used this emotion to force the opponent into a disadvantageous position in public opinion. The reason was very simple. If the villagers could obtain the so-called immortal fate at a lower cost, these people would immediately change sides. In just a moment, Mr. Zhou was already drenched in cold sweat. He had been in the 7-star sect for several years. Relying on his lotus flower persuasion skill, he had made great contributions to the sect. Not only did he have a very high status, but he was also bestowed the immortal fate by the sect's elder. In the past few years, not to mention this remote mountain village, he had even absorbed a prefecture city into his sect. It could be said that he had gone through hundreds of battles, but he had never encountered such a situation. Who exactly is this young man? Isn't he just a low-level disciple of the Lingjian school? Why does he give me such a strong sense of oppression? How could a mere Lingjian school have such an outstanding talent? However, at this time, he couldn't think too much about it. According to his master's instruction, if he encountered such a situation, he must immediately use his unique skill without any hesitation. People's hearts were the most fragile thing. Especially when the Seven Stars sect had yet to gain a firm foothold in the Wang family village, they didn't have enough prestige to make the villagers sacrifice their lives for the sect. Once they were incited to develop the habit of bargaining with the sect, then the sect's plan to develop their force would be greatly hindered. Therefore, Mr. Zhou put on a panicked expression, but he had already made up his mind to use his unique skill, which had a big side effect, but in a short period of time, would be successful. Mr. Zhou raised his hand, which was holding a handkerchief, as if he wanted to wipe off the sweat on his head. However, under the handkerchief, an undetectable purple-black ray of light, like a lightning, shot toward Wang Lu's throat. Kid, if you want to blame someone, blame your bad luck for opposing my seven-star sect. Seeing that you're young, but your cultivation is not bad, I'm afraid you really have an affinity with immortality. Unfortunately, you still can't block my seven-star sect's 7 stars penetrating bone nail. Mr. Zhou's unique skill was a low-level magical tool that was given to him by the sect. Although it was only a low-level magical tool, and it could only be used once, the power of this penetrating bone nail was far beyond the imagination of mortals. A small nail could penetrate more than 1 meter thick rock. Moreover, the needle's tip was coated with a highly toxic poison. Once it touched the blood, not only the throat would be sealed, the victim's flesh and bones would also turn into mud, a horrible sight to behold. As long as he unexpectedly shot this needle, even a middle-level qi cultivating stage cultivator would find it difficult to detect it, let alone resist it. Not to mention this young boy, how could he have a middle-level qi cultivating stage cultivation? As long as he died, he could blame it on the wrath of the heavens. Although the villagers, especially that Master Wang, would be dissatisfied, under the threat of the wrath of the heavens, who would dare to disobey? With a trace of sneer, Mr. Zhou looked at Wang Lu as if he was looking at a corpse. However, at this time, he suddenly found out. The clear eyes of the youngster were looking straight at him. The corners of his mouth curled up in a contemptuous smile as he had expected. Then, a slender hand, as if he had foreseen the future, perfectly blocked the front of his throat. 2 fingers gently pinched the 7-star penetrating bone nail. His body trembled slightly. The penetrating bone nail, which was powerful enough to penetrate the rock, was stopped. Mr. Zhou was horrified. This penetrating bone nail was called a concealed weapon, but even if it was activated in front of someone, without a high-level qi cultivating stage cultivation, it would be difficult to resist, not to mention using one's body to block it. What kind of divine being is this boy? Then, an even more horrifying performance began. Wang Lu pinched the penetrating bone nail, and then, he directly put it into his mouth and chewed it. That crunching sound seemed to be pounding on Mr. Zhou's heart, making it difficult for him to breathe. When Wang Lu swallowed all the residue into his stomach, in his eyes, this young cultivator had already turned into an evil demon. Ridiculous, this power is still inferior to Aya's look up at the starry sky. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.